Heavy rain poured outside as a terrified man ran through a building corridor, chased closely by a horrifying hag. Desperate and gasping for breath, he dashed into a restroom and locked the door behind him. Taking a moment to catch his breath, he turned around, only to see the hag clinging to the ceiling. Without warning, she lunged at him. The scene cut away to reveal it was all part of a game being played in virtual reality. The sudden attack caused Choi Do-yeon, the player, to fall backward from his chair. Gasping, he quickly pulled off his VR headset, laughing nervously while muttering that the jump scare had frightened him to the core. His live stream chat exploded with reactions. Viewers found his fall hilarious. Some joked that he was stuck to the ceiling, while others laughed about him choosing the wrong direction in-game. One even claimed to have thrown their phone while watching. Do-yeon addressed them with wide eyes, explaining how terrifying the experience was in VR. He pointed out the sweat stains on his chair as proof, insisting that the fear was real and not exaggerated. A brief narration introduced him, Choi Do-yeon, a third-year variety game streamer. Thanks to his audience who loved watching him suffer, he had somehow managed to turn it into a full-time job. Looking back at the screen, he cheered at having found the game's exit in a single try. Excited, he asked if everyone had seen it. Then a viewer named Yudi donated 20,000 Karyu with a cheeky message, wondering if Do-yeon would have stayed longer if the ghost had been attractive. Amused and slightly sarcastic, Do-yeon did a headstand against the wall to thank Yudi for the donation. Sitting back down, he responded that he couldn't handle it, no matter how pretty the ghost was. He reminded everyone that if a ghost looked beautiful, it only meant they were already under its spell. With that, he announced he had to end the stream for the day since he planned to head home that night. A viewer asked about his collaboration with Sagi. Do-yeon admitted he hadn't been able to contact him and had to put the plan on hold. Other viewers began chatting amongst themselves, noting that Sagi hadn't streamed in over a month. They wondered if something had happened. Someone recalled Sagi saying he had found an amazing game and asked everyone to look forward to it, only to vanish the next day. Some joked that he had probably gone into hiding just to play the game. Do-yeon remembered Sagi's words, how he had once encouraged him to follow his passion and not let family expectations hold him back. Sagi had shared how his own family disapproved at first, but eventually became more excited about his success than he was. Recalling that moment, Do-yeon told his viewers that maybe something urgent had come up for Sagi. He added that he had planned to visit Sagi's place on his way home anyway. Signing off, he promised to take a break until tomorrow and update them afterward. With that, he ended the stream. Afterward, Do-yeon tried calling Sagi. The call wouldn't connect. Concerned, he wondered aloud if something was really wrong and even considered reporting it to the police. Just then, his mother called. He answered, reassuring her that he was about to leave. He explained he chose to travel at night because of his stream and to avoid traffic. He insisted he wasn't a child and could take care of himself. He told her not to wait up and to go to sleep since he'd arrive at dawn. He promised to say goodbye to his father before leaving and noted that the trip would take about an hour and a half. Then he sets off in his car, but along the way, he feels the urge to pee and pulls over at a rest stop and rushes to the restroom, muttering to himself that if he had held it in for even a moment longer, his stomach might have exploded. As he washed his hands, he noticed a message from his hyung. It had sent him a game link. Do-yeon frowned, wondering if his hyung was truly that concerned. He should have at least called. He tried calling back, but the phone was switched off. Irritated, he thought his hyung only bothered to send a link without even keeping his phone on. Curious, Do-yeon tapped on the link and saw the game's name, Dujin Ghost Love. He had never heard of it before. Reading the game description, he learned it was about ghosts who remain in the world due to lingering attachments, and the player had to conquer them with love to help them pass on peacefully. A dating game with a ghost concept, it sounded absurd to him. He recalled how Woo Sung-jae had claimed to find an insanely good game, told him to look forward to it, and then disappeared the next day. The idea that his hyung might have ghosted them because of an actual ghost game seemed ridiculous. Still, he acknowledged Sung-jae's odd knack for finding games like this. He tapped the install button. At that exact moment, thunder struck outside the cafe, startling him. He wondered how it could be thundering so suddenly. Looking back at his phone, he saw the game was already installed. A warning appeared. Women's lingering grudges are cold enough to bring snowfall even in midsummer. Also, quitting midway is not an option. Is he sure you want to install? Do-yeon shrugged it off, thinking he had nothing to do at his family's place anyway. He decided to try it out, and if it was fun, maybe stream it later. Soon, the matching system on his phone activated. Leaving the rest stop, Do-yeon got in his car and began driving home. Rain began pouring heavily. He hadn't seen any forecast about rain and found it strange. His GPS suddenly said, recalculating route due to deviation. Turn left in a moment. Do-yeon thought it must be a glitch. After all, a left turn on a straight highway made no sense. But the GPS kept repeating itself. Turn left in a moment, recalculating. U-turn in a moment. He had deviated from the route. It went on in loops, left turn, U-turn, recalculating over and over again. Do-yeon grew irritated and shouted in frustration. He tried turning the navigation off, but it wouldn't shut down. Finally, it powered off on its own, leaving him shaken. Suddenly, someone appeared in front of his car. Doyen didn't have time to react. He hit the person. Panicked, he stepped out of the car and rushed over to the fallen figure. He asked if they were okay, shaking them, but there was no response. Seeing no signs of movement, fear set in and his hands trembled. He realized he had to call an ambulance. Just then, his phone buzzed with a notification, a rainy highway. A woman crashed into my car as he hurried home. That moment of panic and worry faded quickly when he realized she wasn't from this world. The fallen woman slowly stood up, her eyes filled with resentment and sorrow. A chill ran down Doyen's spine. The game message posed possibilities, either run away from the ghost or try to understand why she still lingered in this world. One suggestion even said to demand compensation. Doyen scoffed, calling it nonsense. A ghost? He tried to shut off the phone again but failed. His frustration peaked. He cursed himself for downloading random apps. As he looked up, the woman stood and stared at him, her voice echoing with pain, asking why he killed her, why he let her die. When Doyen saw her face clearly, he realized she wasn't human. Shock froze him. His eyes widened and he dropped his phone in terror. The woman, her bones visibly broken, stood unnaturally as she repeated her agonizing question. Her voice was warped and eerie, filled with sorrow and desperation, asking him to help. Doyen could only think, this was not a being of this world. Without a second thought, he turned and ran with his dumb ass for his life, terrified beyond words. As he fled, he cried out in panic, stating that anyone could tell this wasn't a human. The ghost looked at him bitterly, accusing him of being just like everyone else. A system notification from the game appeared. She was very disappointed with Doyen's choice. Affection level has significantly decreased. The ghost screamed, asking why everyone hated her and why no one wanted to see her. Another warning flashed. Her affection level has changed from neutral to hostile. Her grudge deepens and she becomes enraged. Hurry and escape. In fury, the ghost shouted that she had only wanted to live. Doyen ran back to his car, trying to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. He kept trying, desperate to escape before she reached him. But before he could act, the ghost grabbed him by the throat and pinned him down. He struggled, thinking this power wasn't natural. Then suddenly, the ghost's terrifying form transformed into a girl with long, beautiful purple hair. Her expression was full of sadness, and with tears in her eyes, she asked why he wouldn't save her. Doyen remembered his saying, if a ghost appears beautiful, it means you've already been possessed. He realized he was too late, but even so, her sorrow felt unbearably real. Before he could process it further, a truck came speeding toward them and hit him. Blood splattered everywhere. His phone lying nearby was now stained with blood. A photo of the girl appeared on the screen, along with the final game notification. Win her heart. Increase her affection level. Resolve her grudge to restore her true form. Doyen felt as if his bones were shattering and his insides were twisting. The pain was unbearable. Then, in an instant, the scene shifted. He suddenly found himself back at the exact spot where he had first installed the Dujin Coast Love game. A man nearby noticed him and rushed over, asking if he was alright. But Doyen, shaken in panic, screamed at him to stay away. The people around watched with confusion, whispering among themselves, wondering what was wrong with him. One remarked how helping strangers these days could get you in trouble. Doyen glanced around, realizing he was at a rest stop. But just moments ago, he was definitely on the highway. The question of whether everything had been just a dream lingered in his mind. Yet, even if it was, something still felt off. Suddenly, the monitor in front of him lit up. It displayed a message. Choi Doyen, you have died. Restarting from the last save point, there's an ongoing date. It warned that if he didn't wish to continue the date, he should leave the area immediately. Doyen, baffled, questioned what was happening. A date? The screen then displayed the title, The Girl on the Freedom Road, followed by his own profile. His name is Choi Doyen. He is 24 years old, his height is 180 centimeters. His weight is 74 kilograms. Nearby, a man addressed him again, asking if he was a student and if he was feeling okay. Doyen ignored him completely and ran away from the rest stop, not saying a word. He got into his car and began driving toward his home. His thoughts raced. This couldn't be real. It had to be his imagination. Ghosts didn't exist, right? Just because he installed a game, things like this started happening. He hadn't been able to sleep properly due to all the streaming and editing. Maybe if he could just make it home and rest, everything would return to normal. But then the monitor spoke again. Rerouting due to deviation from the route. Doyen shook his head in disbelief, thinking how ridiculous all of this was. The monitor kept updating. In a moment, turn left. Rerouting. Make a U-turn. Go straight. The directions were relentless. He couldn't accept it. There was no way this was actually real. Then, as if fate were mocking him, the same ghost girl appeared before him once again. Terrified, Doyen trembled and shouted, unable to comprehend why this was happening to him. He had only been playing games and streaming in his room. He hadn't hurt anyone or made enemies. Was all of this truly happening just because of one game install? He pleaded for some kind of explanation. And then the monitor responded again. As Doyen struggled between dream and reality, she appears before me again. For the second time already, trying to collect himself, Doyen reminded himself that in the end, this was just a game. Everything would be fine. He played visual novels during his streams before. All he needed to do was pick the best options to raise the character's affection level. The monitor then presented 4 choices. First option is, isn't she already dead? Carefully turn the car around and escape. Second is, she want to die again. Get out of the car and yell in anger. Third option is, offer to drive her home. Fourth option is, ask what she's doing here and find out her situation. With the choices before him, Doyen braced himself. If he could stay calm and choose wisely, maybe he could get through this nightmare. Doyen tried to steady his breath, clutching the steering wheel as tightly as he could, his knuckles white from the tension. His heart pounded in his chest, the sound louder than the rain pelting the windshield. Everything depended on building up enough affection. That was the rule. If he followed it closely, if he just made the right choices, then it would all work out in the end. Even if he only chose the safest, most neutral options, he'd at least achieve an average outcome. That was the logic. That was the comfort he clung to. He closed his eyes for a moment and reminded himself not to panic. He was Choi Doyen. He was good at games. This was no different. Now that things had escalated to this point, there was no point hesitating anymore. There was only one path forward. See it through and hope for the best. As he tried to muster the courage to act, the ghost appeared beside his car, her pale hand knocking gently but repeatedly on the window. Her voice seeped through the barrier of glass, shaky and heavy with pain. She asked why he kept turning away, why he was ignoring her suffering. Her words, strained and soaked in anguish, echoed like a dull blade scraping against the inside of his skull. She said it wasn't fair. Why did she have to be the only one hurting? Her repeated cries of injustice filled the night air, clinging to him like the cold mist. It's unfair. If Doyen gritted his teeth, he had to focus. He reminded himself again, this was a Bisuyo dating simulation. Just a visual novel with branching paths and predetermined choices. There was no reason to be afraid. He had done this 1,000 times in other games. This wasn't real. Still, he couldn't stop shaking. He stepped out of the car, an umbrella trembling in his hand, and cautiously approached her. His voice was uneven as he tried to explain himself. He insisted that he wasn't a suspicious person, just someone caught up in something beyond his understanding. He didn't know the full story, but he wanted to help. With whatever courage he could summon, he extended an offer. Would she like to go for a drive? He'd take her home. As if in response to his decision, a message flashed on the invisible interface before him. He chose option C, suggest a drive, offering to take her home. A choice was made. But instead of relief, a wave of dread crashed over him. He had said the words. There was no going back. Still, fear clung to him like a second skin. He wanted to bolt, leave everything behind, but she just stared at him in silence. No movement, no reaction. Just those hollow, dark eyes watching him closely. His thoughts spiraled. Had he chosen incorrectly? Was this a fatal mistake? But there hadn't been a better option available. Surely she wouldn't retaliate just because she didn't like his answer right. Then finally she spoke, softly, as if testing reality itself, asking whether he could actually see her. Doyen's voice wavered as he responded. Yes, he could see her. The ghost moved forward without warning and embraced him. Her thin arms wrapped around his trembling body as she collapsed onto him. She wept uncontrollably, her sobs piercing through the heavy curtain of rain. With every breathless cry, she pleaded, "Please don't leave me behind. I don't want to be alone anymore. Please, I can't take this pain. Please, stay with me." A digital prompt emerged in front of his eyes. Your choice has slightly increased her favorability. Her condition stabilizes. Something within him shifted. He had been too focused on surviving, too wrapped up in fear to see her clearly. But now, as she clung to him with desperation carved into every movement, he began to understand. This wasn't just a ghost. She was a person, someone with a story. Someone who had been hurt so deeply that she could no longer contain the sorrow inside her. She slowly stepped back and muttered an apology. Only then did Doyen realize how drenched he was. The rain had soaked through every layer of his clothing. If he stayed out in this cold much longer, he'd end up collapsing too. He politely asked her to step aside so he could open the car door. Once she complied, he helped her into the passenger seat and quickly slipped behind the wheel. His hands were still shaking. His mind was racing again. Somehow, he had managed to get her inside. But now what? The atmosphere shifted. It no longer felt like a cutscene. There were no new choices, no menu prompts, no helpful hints. It was just the two of them, sitting awkwardly in the cold car. He hadn't expected this. It felt like the game had abandoned him. A free date? That wasn't part of the structure. This wasn't how dating sims worked. His eyes darted to the side view mirror. That car, the one from before, it was the same one that had killed him. It had appeared on the highway when all this began. He shipped the thought away. The highway was dangerous, that much was certain. But right now, he needed to stay focused. The game no longer mattered. This was beyond that now. He decided to drive somewhere quiet, maybe a park or a residential street, somewhere calm, somewhere they could talk again once she had calmed down. Turning to her, he noted that the door on her side hadn't fully closed. He He offered to fix it and leaned over, trying to stay as composed as possible. He repeated the mantra in his head, "Stay calm, stay careful." One careless move could ruin everything. As he pushed the door tighter, his phone suddenly slipped from his hand. Reflexively, he reached down to grab it, but in doing so, his head accidentally pressed against her thigh. Time froze. His breath caught in his throat. This was no longer just a mistake, it was a disaster. He was completely, utterly screwed. Doyen's heart pounded violently in his chest as the ghost's wide, trembling eyes locked onto his. There was something deeply unsettling in her expression, something that reached beyond fear and confusion, a flicker of tragic realization. Her voice trembled as she spoke, cracked with disbelief, asking if this was the reason she had been brought here. The weight of her question was suffocating, as if the very air inside the car had turned cold and heavy. A surge of panic crashed over Doyen. His breath hitched as his body instinctively backed away, hands raised in defense, voice high and desperate. He shook his head vigorously, denying it over and over. It wasn't what she thought. It couldn't be. He tried to explain through stammered words that it had been nothing more than an accident. The door hadn't been closing right. He just tried to help fix it. That was all. There had been no hidden motive, no ill will. Inside his mind, chaos reigned. Dread twisted in his gut as the realization hit him. He was definitely going to die. There was no escaping it. She was a ghost, and he had clearly angered her. In his head, he had already accepted his fate. He was just an ordinary guy caught in something far beyond his understanding. Trying desperately to diffuse the tension, Doyen spoke quickly, explaining that they couldn't just stand there blocking the road. His voice trembled as he admitted that he thought she hadn't been able to close the door alone, so he had only tried to lend a hand. He kept repeating how harmless he was, as if trying to convince both her and himself. He wasn't brave enough to hurt anyone even if he wanted to. He mentioned his old school nickname, Shut-in Gamer, as proof of just how non-threatening he really was. Then, awkwardly, he tried to shift the conversation. He apologized and asked if maybe it could just drive a little further to the nearest rest stop. Something about the atmosphere on that stretch of highway felt deeply unsettling. But just as quickly, he tried to backtrack, adding that if she didn't want to, it was perfectly fine. He didn't want to seem like he was forcing her. What came next caught him completely off guard. The ghost suddenly burst into laughter, a soft, unexpected sound that echoed through the car. It wasn't cruel or mocking, but light and oddly warm. She apologized mid-laugh, admitting that her laughter came from a wave of relief washing over her. She explained that she had been terrified the first person she met might be someone dangerous or untrustworthy. But now, sitting there with him, she felt a strange sense of comfort. She thanked him for stopping, for not turning away, and for giving her a ride. With a gentle tone, she introduced herself as Hyeon and asked for his name. Doyen, still shaken but relieved by the shift in mood, managed to introduce himself, Choi Doyen. Hyeon smiled and thanked him again. She said it must have been inconvenient, and yet he still chose to help her. Doyen quickly brushed it off, saying it wasn't a big deal at all. Just a small detour, nothing worth mentioning. As she looked out the window, her voice dropped to a quiet murmur. She said it all felt strange, surreal even. She had never imagined she'd get the chance to talk to someone like this again. Somewhere along the way, she had given up on hope entirely. Doyen hesitated, then carefully asked if she felt comfortable sharing what had happened. He wanted to know why she had been wandering the highway, what had led her to this point. But realizing it could be painful, he softened his voice, saying she didn't need to explain if it was too hard to talk about. He just couldn't help but be curious. Hyeon's expression shifted, becoming distant and pained. She began slowly, haltingly, as if recalling pieces of a fragmented nightmare. She admitted she didn't understand everything herself. She had been taken away by a man she had never seen before, a complete stranger. Then everything went black. When she came to, she found herself alone on the highway, confused and disoriented. At first, she believed she had miraculously survived whatever had happened. She clung to that belief, desperate and hopeful. She didn't even realize she had already died. Fear consumed her. Terrified the man might return, she started running anywhere just away. She stayed on the highway, hoping someone would help. But something felt wrong. People passed her by without a glance. No one heard her cries. Days went by. Her legs ached. Her voice grew hoarse, but the road never ended. She was trapped in a loop that no one else could see. Eventually, the truth sank in. She had died. And she was bound to that place, alone, forgotten, unseen. Her voice trembled as she admitted how unbelievable it felt when Doyen first spoke to her. After so long without contact, she had thought she was hallucinating. She apologized, embarrassed by how much she was talking, how emotional she had become. But the thought of seeing her family, even if just once, made her eyes well up. She gave a soft, tearful laugh and thanked him again. Doyen remained silent, torn by the weight of her words. He struggled to find something, anything that could ease the pain she carried. But nothing he could think of felt right. Finally, he asked quietly what she would do if her family couldn't see her. Hyeon took a breath and paused before answering. In a voice almost too soft to hear, she asked if it would be okay for her to stay a little longer. Doyen's eyes widened in surprise. The question had caught him off guard. Noticing his reaction, Hye-yeon smiled again, this time with a hint of shyness. She said his shock expression made her feel a little embarrassed. Then she gently asked if, at the very least, he could deliver her final message to her family. Without hesitation, Do-yeon nodded, his voice steady and sincere. Do-yeon's thoughts spiraled into a whirlwind of disbelief. No matter how many times he tried to rationalize it, the truth kept slipping further away. Was Hye-yeon really just a character created by lines of code and game? The idea gnawed at him, hollow and surreal. His mind overflowed with questions, endless, pressing, and unanswered. Yet, amid the confusion and disbelief, one emotion rose above the rest, an earnest, heartfelt wish. He truly wanted her to meet her family. That one hope grounded him amidst the chaos. But before he could even begin to untangle his thoughts, everything shifted. Without warning, a cold system message cut through the atmosphere like a blade announcing the end of the date. The peaceful moment shattered and Do-yeon was left standing there, stunned and confused, struggling to grasp what was happening. The warmth in the air disappeared. Reality, or whatever semblance of it he was in, seemed to evaporate around him. As the digital scenery faded, he reached out, desperate to hold onto the connection. Hye-yeon turned back to him, her expression a mix of sorrow and understanding. She apologized softly, explaining that her sense of clarity only returned at night. Even though he had helped her so much, she felt powerless during the day, barely able to hold on to herself. With guilt lacing her voice, she made one more request. She knew it was selfish, but she needed a little more time, just a little longer before everything slipped away again. Do-yeon didn't hesitate. He told her he'd be staying at his parents' house until tomorrow. That meant he had time. Time to see her again. Time to speak the words left unspoken. There was still so much he hadn't been able to express, so much he wanted to understand. He asked her to meet him again that night, at the same time in the same place as before. Hye-yeon smiled faintly, her expression calm but sincere. She nodded without a hint of doubt. She would be there. She would wait for him tonight. Then, just as quickly as she had appeared, she was gone. In her place, another screen popped up in front of him, a system notification blinking in bold letters. The midnight date has ended. His romance score obtained, he got 80 points, and 1 death penalty applied. His romance rank is B. He have earned 40 LP. The LP shop has been unlocked. Do-yeon stared at the screen, expression unreadable. The metrics and points meant nothing to him. It was just a string of data, cold and personal, but the feelings that lingered from the night before were anything but. Morning light crept into the room. The long, emotionally draining night had passed, but its weight clung to him like a shadow. Do-yeon remained still, trying to make sense of the digital chaos around him. Another tip appeared on the screen, as if mocking his confusion. During a free date, even his smallest actions can affect the character's affinity. The words repeated in his head like a broken record. LP, affinity, rank. These weren't terms of affection. They were game mechanics. It all began to sink in. This was a game, a dating simulation game. But none of it felt like a game. The hollowness in his chest grew deeper. The emotions from last night, the sadness, a longing in Hye-yeon's eyes, the warmth in her voice, they were still painfully real. He could still feel the lingering presence of her smile. How could something so genuine exist inside a fabricated world? And then came the memories. The image of her alone on that dark highway, lost and wandering. Why had she been there? Was she as part of a storyline, or had she really existed once in the real world? Was she a soul trapped inside the system, or something far more tragic? His chest tightened. The more he thought about it, the more it felt like he was sinking. Questions piled on top of one another, each one heavier than the last. He felt suffocated by the weight of his own thoughts. Then his phone buzzed. A message appeared. His Hyung texted him to come to his place. A glimmer of hope flashed in his eyes. His brother might know something. Maybe he could finally get some answers. Without wasting a moment, he dialed his number. But all he got in return was silence. The number you were trying to reach is turned off. His grip on the phone tightened. Frustration mixed with fear. What was his brother doing? Why now? He rushed out and headed straight to his brother's apartment. When he arrived, the door was ajar, left slightly open as if someone had left in a hurry. Do-yeon stepped inside, cautiously calling out his brother's name. But there was no response. The apartment was empty. Panic began to rise. The place looked as if it had been hastily abandoned. Papers and documents were scattered across the desk and floor. The air inside was still and quiet, unnervingly so. Then his eyes landed on something lying near the edge of the desk, a single sheet of paper slightly crumpled. He picked it up and froze. It was a missing person notice, and on it was Hye-yeon's photo. Time stopped. His breath caught in his throat as the paper trembled in his hands. The weight of everything crashed down on him at once. He had only installed a game, and not just any game, a Bishoujo dating simulation game. But this was something else entirely. Do-yeon stared at the missing person flyer, his thoughts spiraling in disbelief. Hye-yeon's face was on it. The bold text beneath urged readers to report any tips that could lead to the missing person's whereabouts. Confused, Do-yeon wondered how someone who stayed home playing games ended up like this. It didn't make sense. His eyes drifted to a nearby wall plastered with photos, images of murder victims and missing individuals. Most of them were linked to tragic cases. Haeyeon too had been murdered by someone she'd never seen before. Some of the articles looked familiar. He had seen them on the news. It struck him then, maybe people who were unjustly murdered returned as ghosts, taking on the forms of game characters. He opened a notebook his older brother had once written in. It explained how each ghost appeared at the place where they died or somewhere that held strong emotional ties. As long as they had a physical body, they couldn't move too far from that location. Though there were variations, these wandering spirits tended to vanish during times of strong positive energy, like in the morning. The note warned that no matter what, the game couldn't be quit or deleted. Like any other dating sim, the only way to progress was to raise affection levels and reach an ending. Doyeon stared at the page, overwhelmed. Suddenly, a ghost wearing a teddy bear mask appeared before him. Flames flickered from her body as she muttered warnings, telling him to hide well or his hair would show. She dismissed hiding in the garden, warning about stepping on lettuce seeds. Doyeon froze, fear tightening in his chest. A notification popped up on his phone's game screen. It read, "Warning, her affection level is hatred. Escape immediately." The ghost continued, listing more places not to hide. Not near the fence or he'd crush pumpkin vines. She spotted a red ribbon. Then her voice turned chilling. She had found him. In the next moment, fire burst from her body, shattering the glass nearby. The room exploded. Doyeon's brother's entire room was consumed in the blast. Pipes burst, releasing a cascade of water. Doyeon lay injured on the floor, trembling and dazed, his thoughts reeling. What kind of game was this? Why had his brother sent him the link? Another message from his brother's diary surfaced in his mind. His brother asking for help. Tears welled up as Doyeon realized his brother may have been pleading for his help all along. Then the ghost reappeared, this time standing inches away. Holding a broken bag, she slammed it down on him, whispering that because of him, they all died. Blood spilled and Doyeon collapsed. A system message appeared. Doyeon has died. He was suddenly back in the same place where he had parked his car earlier. His body shook violently as he gasped for air. His voice cracked with despair. Why was this happening to him? He tried calling his brother again, but the phone was switched off. Panic grew in his chest. He reopened the cursed game, checking the time. How long had he been stuck like this without a solution? But now, at least he had learned a few things. The game couldn't be deleted. Even if he threw away his phone and returned, there was a limit to his lives. At first he hadn't been sure, but the UI design and the two missing heart icons made it clear his remaining lives were being tracked. A ghost dating sim that gambled with real lives was absurd. Telling anyone would only make him seem insane. If he could get that notebook again, maybe he'd find more answers. But he couldn't go back there. Still, sitting around would change nothing. He had made a promise to help, yet move forward. He visited Haeyeon's old neighborhood, questioning an older woman about her family. She told him they had moved out over a year ago. A father and his two daughters had once lived upstairs, but after the older daughter disappeared, they eventually relocated. When Doyeon asked if she knew where they went or had any contact information, she shook her head. She didn't know. She advised him to leave them alone. They had just begun rebuilding their lives with the younger daughter. It was best not to stir things up again. As he walked away, Doyeon wondered if the residents were unaware that Haeyeon was actually dead. The family had moved on. So what was the point of coming here now? Haeyeon could only move at night. He had thought maybe he could take her to her family if he found them. That hope was gone. He called his mother and told her something had come up so he couldn't come today. She was upset, reminding him that he had promised. His older brother was already there. Their dad was arriving soon. Doyeon insisted he definitely come tomorrow and ended the call. Looking at Haeyeon's missing poster again, his mind drifted back to the notebook. It had stated that wandering spirits disappeared in the morning, but the ghost he encountered at the deletion-type house had appeared during the day. The residents didn't seem to know Haeyeon was dead. If her body was ever found, maybe she'd be free to move beyond nighttime. It was best to meet her and ask directly. If the body were discovered, the family would surely be contacted. He sighed. It was already so late. It would have been nice if they had found something tonight. What if they ended up disappointing her? Meanwhile, Haeyeon stood by the roadside, watching every passing car. She hoped each one might be Doyeon, but it never was. Still, she consoled herself. They had promised to meet later. Not much time had passed. There was no need to rush. He would come soon. Rain started falling. The night deepened. Doyeon sat alone on the roadside, silently crying under the streetlights. Eventually, he approached her and asked if she was okay. Apologizing for being late, he explained that he had only meant to take a short nap, but hadn't heard his alarm. The midnight date was about to begin. Haeyeon leaned her head gently on his chest. She had feared he wouldn't come. He softly reassured her. Next time, he'd arrive earlier. As the night deepened, Doyeon and Haeyeon sat quietly in the car, and the atmosphere heavy but calm. She stood by the passenger door, hesitant. Doyeon looked at her, puzzled by her awkward posture. She appeared visibly uncomfortable. She finally admitted how embarrassed she felt, as if she wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. Do-yeon tried to ease the tension by sharing that he had gone to her house earlier that day. The news made her eyes light up with excitement. She quickly asked how it went, whether his family was doing well, and if by any chance they had talked about her. But the truth dampened her enthusiasm. He told her that her family had moved out a year ago. Someone else was living there now. Her smile faded and a quiet sadness took over. She apologized for making him go all the way there for nothing. Do-yeon gently shifted the subject. He suggested they stop by a nearby convenience store to talk. There, they could try contacting her parents directly. If that didn't work, they could report her as missing to the police. He insisted that they should at least try everything they could. She didn't have to worry. He would help her through it all. Hearing this, Hae-yeon hesitated. Her voice lowered as she asked him just one thing. Why was he helping her so much? She had nothing to offer in return. He could have easily ignored her. Her words hummed in the air, raw and uncertain. Do-yeon thought for a moment. Part of him wanted to say he was only doing this because of the cursed game, that he should just delete it and be done. But he couldn't bring himself to say that out loud. Just then, a notification from the game appeared on his phone, prompting him to choose a response to her question. Two options were displayed: Option A, because you are my type, and Option B, because I feel bad for you. Panic crept into him. He didn't know what to say. Flustered, he blurted out the first option, confessing that it was because she was his type. Hae-yeon tilted her head, confused by his words. She asked if by type he meant he had a ghost fetish or something strange. Embarrassed, Do-yeon quickly denied it. He tried to explain. He only wanted to help because she had looked so sad. A beautiful person had been crying and he couldn't walk away from that. It wasn't anything special. That's all there was to it. There was a moment of silence. Then Hae-yeon softly asked if he hadn't come all the way here on purpose. Before he could respond, the car's GPS voice interrupted, announcing that they would arrive at their destination shortly. Do-yeon and Hae-yeon arrived at a nearby location where Do-yeon pointed to a convenience store. Hae-yeon looked at it and questioned if he had simply chosen the nearest one. Laughing it off, she explained that she just needed to be cautious. After all, there were people who helped others only to demand money from their families or request something shady in return. She admitted that without Do-yeon's help, she would still be wandering the streets alone and would have likely been kicked out again. Surprised by her comment, Do-yeon hurried to clarify that he never had such intentions. Hae-yeon burst out laughing, saying she was only joking and found his reaction funny, encouraging him to keep reacting like that. Do-yeon asked her to stop teasing him, to which she apologized playfully and admitted she felt more at ease now. She reassured herself that Do-yeon didn't seem like a bad person and then quickly brushed it off, saying she was just talking to herself. But upon realizing the convenience store was closed, they both wondered what to do next. Do-yeon suggested moving to another place. Hae-yeon proposed that instead of going back, they should just go ahead and find shelter from the rain to have a proper chat. They soon booked a room at a nearby motel. As soon as they entered the room, Hae-yeon jumped onto the bed, exclaiming how soft it felt. Do-yeon asked if she came there just for the bed. Hae-yeon responded that after living on asphalt every day, she had truly missed the comfort of a real bed. All she could see for days had been endless highways and the cries of deer, but what she missed most was the softness of a mattress. She told Do-yeon to lie down too. Embarrassed, Do-yeon asked her not to say things that could be misunderstood. Hae-yeon insisted it was really soft. Trying to shift the topic, Do-yeon mentioned something he had learned, that ghosts with bodies left behind often linger near the place they died and eventually disappear when the sun rises. Then he pulled out a missing person flyer and showed it to her. He had found it when he visited her house. The residents there had said that she went missing 2 years ago. Even when he contacted the missing persons center, she was still officially listed as missing. Do-yeon asked her to explain what had happened. Hae-yeon admitted she didn't fully know either. Her name, age, and height were listed minus 22 years old, 1 centimeter. She recalled heading home after finishing her part-time job, and when she barely regained consciousness, the accident had already occurred. A man staggering like he was drunk got out of the car and made a phone call. When he noticed she was still alive, he slowly approached and strangled her until she passed out. She remembered being placed in his car and taken somewhere. The man had a rose tattoo on the back of his hand. Outside the car, she saw an abandoned warehouse and some container boxes, but beyond that, her memory was unclear. Do-yeon assured her that it was okay and acknowledged how urgent the situation must have been. He asked if she knew the man. She confirmed that he was a complete stranger. In his mind, Do-yeon pieced the events together. Drunk driving had likely caused the accident, and out of fear, the man had tried to dispose of the body. Do-yeon suggested that they should begin by checking satellite maps for abandoned warehouses. If they could narrow down the location, they might be able to find her body. He insisted they should catch the criminal together, and that someone who committed murder should be punished. If her family helped, things could go smoother. He asked if she remembered their contact information, since it had been listed on the missing poster. Hae-yeon hesitated. A lot of time had passed, and she worried. What if her family had stopped searching? What if reaching out only brought them more pain? Do-yeon reassured her that wouldn't happen. Her family had gone through so much trying to find her. They even moved because living in the same place reminded them of her too much. According to neighbors, her family was very close. From what he heard, it was clear that they missed her deeply. He reminded her that she wasn't the only one who wanted to reunite. Even if things didn't go as planned, Doyeon promised to help. Haeun looked at him and asked if he had gone around asking so many questions on purpose. She felt touched. She apologized and thanked him. Since it was already late, Doyeon suggested they leave a message first. Haeun agreed. On Doyeon's phone screen, a system notification appeared showing that the actor's actions had increased Haeun's affection level. Just then, Doyeon asked if her father's name was Haebyomtae. The name had popped up on KakaoTalk. Hearing this, Haeun grew excited and leaned in, wanting to see it too. But in the process, she accidentally fell onto Doyeon. His expression caught her attention, making her chuckle. She asked what kind of face he was making. Embarrassed, Doyeon asked her to get off, saying she was heavy. Still chuckling, she pointed out that his cheeks and ears had turned red, asking if he really got excited that easily. Doyeon, pushing her away lightly, stood up and commented on how her eyes always changed when she was teasing him. Haeun laughed, admitting she hadn't even realized. Doyeon said he would go wash up first. He hadn't showered in 2 days because of the rain and felt gross. He reminded her that her family might be shocked, so they should think carefully about what to write in the message. Haeun agreed. While Doyeon went into the bathroom, Haeun lay on the bed, smiling to herself. It had been so long since she felt this kind of comfort. Without realizing it, she kept teasing him. Being together like this was genuinely fun. In her heart, she wished the morning would never come. Inside the bathroom, Doyeon was taking a shower, his cheeks faintly red as thoughts of Haeun crossed his mind. Suddenly, Doyeon's phone began to ring. It was Sakche-hyun calling him. Haeun noticed the screen lighting up with a call. On the other side, Sakche desperately tried calling Doyeon. Panic filled his voice as he pleaded through the phone, his words trembling. Tears welled in his eyes and his hands shook as he whispered for Doyeon to pick up. Each ring echoed louder in his ears, adding to the weight of dread closing in on him. Suddenly, an eerie chill crept over Sakche. A terrifying ghost emerged nearby, her presence suffocating and her aura drenched in malice. Her voice, twisted and unnatural, echoed with a haunting familiarity as she addressed him. She called him Appa, her tone swinging between sweetness and rage. Her words cut deep, reminding him that he once said she was pretty, that they were supposed to go on a date. Now she demanded answers, her voice laced with betrayal and obsession. Over and over, she asked why he was running away, her tone growing darker with each word. Sakche stood frozen, unable to respond as the ghost's voice echoed around him like a curse. Later, after getting freshened up, Doyeon returned and tried calling Sakche, but Sakche didn't answer the phone. Watching this, Haeun wondered aloud if it had been an important call. She questioned if she should have said something earlier. Doyeon reassured her, saying it was okay. If there wasn't a problem, the call would come again. But as he repeated those words, uncertainty lingered. From her bed, Haeun looked over and asked Doyeon if he was really okay, even lying on the floor like that. Doyeon, now lying on the floor, smiled faintly and said it was fine. He explained that since he sat for long periods, sometimes he slept on the floor when his back ached. Curious, Haeun hesitated before asking about Doyeon, what kind of work he did, when he started seeing ghosts, and whether his family had a shamanic background since he mentioned visiting his family home. Doyeon responded casually. He wasn't part of any spiritual lineage. He was just a game streamer. He had grown up without any connection to that world. Haeun was, in fact, the first ghost he had ever seen. She found it fascinating that he suddenly started seeing spirits and teasingly pointed out that she was his first. Excited, she expressed a desire to visit his apartment and see how he did his broadcasts. Embarrassed, Doyeon admitted that his place was small and messy, but Haeun said that only made her want to visit more. He told her that once her business was resolved, he'd invite her over. As they talked, the night gradually gave way to dawn. Haeun beamed with excitement. It would be her first time visiting a guy's place. She hesitated and then asked if she could see him again tomorrow too. But before Doyeon could respond, Haeun vanished. Doyeon reached out, calling her name. The system window appeared. The Magnite deity, aka NDE. His romance SCORE is being calculated. His romance rank is A. He had GAINE 60 LP. Returning home, Doyeon stood outside his family's gate and mumbled to himself. He had said he'd come, and now he had. His father's harsh words echoed in his head, that he must be pathetic for expecting anything from someone like him. Bitterly, Doyeon reflected on how he had acted so confident in front of Haeun, that here he was unsure and defeated. He told himself to just eat quickly and leave. Inside, Doyeon greeted his father, asking if he had been doing well. His father didn't respond. Instead, his mother welcomed him, saying his brother would arrive soon and asked him to wait a little. They sat down to eat. His father turned to his older son, asking how life was as a medical resident. His brother replied that he was getting used to it. His father reminded him not to let his guard down, that becoming a doctor wasn't easy. Doyeon's mother intervened, scolding the father for pressuring someone who was already doing well. The father denied it, but she insisted that he was always pushing unnecessarily. The older brother smoothed over the tension, saying it was fine. Dad had gone through the same, and he probably meant it from experience. His mother sighed and said his personality had to be accepted. Having at least the eldest son around helped her feel at ease. Then she turned the conversation to Doyeon, asking how he was doing lately. Doyeon hesitated, already anticipating the question. He replied vaguely, saying he was managing. But inside, he reflected on how he had run away from this house 3 years ago, fully aware that he no longer had the right to return. As he stood to leave, his brother asked where he was going. Doyeon replied that he was just heading to the convenience store. His brother stopped him, saying 3 years was long enough. It was time to get himself together. Doyeon, with clenched resolve, replied that it had nothing to do with him. He'd handle things himself. He then sent a message to Haeyeon's father, asking him to trust just once and call back. He wrote that Haeyeon was waiting. The reply came quickly and cold. Haeyeon's father said he was tired of this kind of contact and told him to leave their family alone. They were living just fine. Moments later, Doyeon ran toward the convenience store, counting his expenses, gas money, motel fees, and even a shovel. It looked like he would have to survive on cup noodles for the rest of the month. His thoughts turned toward the LP system. After a date ended, LP would be awarded based on the relationship score. That LP could be used in the shop. Without a minimum of 10 points, one couldn't even check item usage for things they couldn't buy. Among the available items, one seemed potentially helpful for his current situation. Just in case, Doyeon decided to use it. Driving through the night, he followed his GPS until a voice finally guided him. He had arrived at his destination. He recalled that there were 3 warehouses near the area where he first met Haeyeon. All 3 had shipping containers. Even photos from 2 years ago showed that this was the only location with containers. But there was a problem. An alert confirmed that the item was now in use. Doyeon sighed. How was he supposed to find anything using just one old photo as a hint? Still, he tried to stay hopeful. Having something was better than nothing. The mountain ahead wasn't even that large. If he searched the whole area, he might find what he was looking for. With that thought, Doyeon began digging. Time passed slowly and fatigue began to weigh down his limbs. Doubt crept in. Was this even possible? Finding a tree with a hole in it in a forest filled with trees? Did he really have to do this alone? Maybe it would be better to convince Haeyeon's family instead. If the bereaved family got involved, things might somehow work out. But for now, all of this remained just his own theory. Doyeon, now determined, muttered to himself that he needed to meet Haeyeon one more time. His legs trembled with every small movement, the fatigue in his body exposing how unfit he really was. He sighed, realizing he truly needed to start exercising. Suddenly, Haeyeon's voice echoed in his memory, the haunting words she once said. "Yomi Shwai, didn't he saving her?" resonated deep within him. As those words struck his heart, Doyeon rose to his feet, confused and questioning his own actions. He wondered what he was even doing here, why he was going to such lengths for someone he had just met. A sudden notification popped up on his phone. The women from Jord. It clicked. The realization dawned upon him, Haeyeon's body must be nearby. Driven by a new sense of urgency, he began to dig again. While shoveling through the dirt, thoughts swirled in his mind. He reminded himself of his responsibilities, work, rent, and survival. He didn't have time for this. After all, she was just someone he had met 2 days ago. But the truth was, he didn't want to abandon her. He didn't want her to remain lost, buried in silence, or to cry alone with no one to hear. Maybe there were other ways to delete the game, but this wasn't about the game anymore. Then, just as he dug deeper, something caught his eye. A shape. Bones. A skeleton slowly emerged from the soil. His eyes widened in shock, unable to look away as truth lay bare in front of him. As Haeyeon slowly stepped into the clearing, her eyes widened with disbelief. Standing there amidst the faint light seeping through the trees was a familiar figure, Doyeon. Her lips parted, trembling with emotion as she softly whispered his name, her voice laced with a blend of shock, confusion, and a fragile glimmer of hope. Her gaze remained fixed on him as if afraid that the vision before her might vanish at any moment. But it didn't. He was truly there. A small, relieved smile touched her face as the reality sank in. Doyeon stood equally stunned, his breath catching the moment their eyes met. Haeyeon's appearance had shifted. It wasn't how he remembered her before. Something about her aura, the clarity in her skin, the lightness in her eyes. It all felt different. Yet before he could speak, Haeyeon addressed it first. She explained how she had woken up to find herself back to normal, her body restored as if nothing had happened. But now it was Doyeon who seemed broken. His clothes were dusty and torn, his hands scraped, and his face drawn with fatigue and distress. She immediately noticed the change, pointing out his disheveled state with concern, asking if something terrible had happened to him. Doyeon tried to shake it off, insisting that it was nothing. But the tension in his voice and the heaviness in his eyes revealed the truth he wasn't ready to say. The place they stood in reeked of danger, both physically and emotionally. He urged her to move away from that spot to somewhere safer, so they could talk without the weight of the place pressing down on them. But as they turned, something caught Haeyeon's eye. Her gaze dropped to the ground and her steps slowed. Just a few feet away, half covered by dry leaves and dirt, was something chilling. A skeleton, decayed, weathered, and disturbingly still, lay sprawled beneath the trees. Her heart stopped. Her breath hitched. Recognition struck like lightning. That was her. That lifeless body belonged to her former self. A quiet, numb acknowledgement escaped her lips. She had suspected it deep down, but now the truth stood in front of her like a cold slap to the soul. She understood what had happened. Doyeon had been the one who discovered her. That explained everything. She recalled how she usually awoke in a different part of the forest, always near the road, always with a familiar surrounding. But this time had been different. She had opened her eyes in this secluded area, confused and disoriented. It hadn't made sense until now. Still, despite the shock, she comforted Doyeon with a gentle smile. She told him it was all right. She had been aware even in death. She had known she was gone. And now somehow she was back. She reassured him again she was okay. There was no need for him to carry this pain. But Doyeon couldn't hold back any longer. His vision blurred and warm tears spilled over his cheeks. The sight of her body, the weight of guilt and helplessness. It broke something inside him. He trembled, overcome by emotion. Haeyeon stepped closer, her hands soft as she wiped away his tears. She told him not to look so sad, not to blame himself. It wasn't his fault, but her words only deepened the ache in his chest. Seeing her trying to comfort him even now made it worse. The sadness in her expression echoed in his heart like a lingering wound. Doyeon could only think of how powerless he truly was, how he hadn't been able to save her, protect her, or even stop her from dying. Just then, bright flashing lights pierced through the trees. The hum of engines and the rustle of boots on fallen leaves filled the air. Police vehicles had surrounded the area, and officers began sealing off the scene with yellow tape and portable barricades. A tall man in plain clothes stepped forward. His presence was calm but commanding. He introduced himself as Detective Han Young-cheol from the Violent Crimes Unit. His eyes scanned the area with sharp precision before settling on Doyeon. With a practiced tone, the detective began his inquiry. He said he had returned from inspecting the crime scene and already had several questions in mind. According to the report, Doyeon had stumbled upon strange markings, decided to investigate, and ended up digging only to find a buried skeleton. The story on the surface sounded strange enough, but the part that bothered the detective the most was the fact that Doyeon had brought a shovel with him. What kind of person walks into a mountain at night carrying a shovel, unless they had a very specific purpose? The detective clarified that the real investigation would take place later at the station, but he couldn't hide his curiosity. He asked why, out of the entire vast mountain, Doyeon had chosen to dig precisely at that one spot. It didn't seem like a coincidence. From a professional standpoint, it looked more like the act of someone hiding guilt, someone who had committed the crime, then regretted it enough to return and report it himself. Doyeon, now visibly shaken, tried to speak. His voice cracked as he explained that he had done it because he felt bad for Haeyeon. That was all. He hadn't meant any harm. He just wanted to help. But the moment her name slipped from his lips, the detective narrowed his eyes. He repeated the name, Haeyeon. That in his tone changed. Cold. Direct. He pointed out that the body hadn't even been identified yet. No name had been released, so how exactly did Doyeon know who the victim was? The question hummed in the air, heavy and unrelenting. Doyeon stood frozen, unable to respond. His lips trembled, his hands clenched by his sides. Every eye was on him. And in that moment, under the weight of truth and suspicion, silence was the only answer he had. As thoughts swirled in Doyeon's mind, he struggled to find the right words. He couldn't tell the detective that he had seen a ghost. He knew it would sound insane. The idea of revealing the truth about the game crossed his mind, but he pushed it aside. No one would believe him. Just then, Haeyeon's voice rang out, filled with urgency and desperation. She insisted that Doyeon had genuinely tried to help her. After all, the others couldn't even see her. Doyeon's anxiety deepened. He was overwhelmed, unsure of how to explain everything. He begged them to believe him. At that moment, a man came running up. Haeyeon's father. Breathless and frantic, he shouted out, announcing that his daughter was there. Seeing him, Haeyeon's emotions surged. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at her father after so long. Recognizing Doyeon, the man rushed toward him. He confirmed that Doyeon was the one who had contacted him. Doyeon told him the truth, that he had found Haeyeon's body. Though it might be hard to believe, he asked the man for a moment of trust. Haeyeon wanted to see her father, even if just once. Overwhelmed, her father called out for his daughter, asking where she was. Doyeon turned to respond, saying she was right beside him. But before he could finish, the detective stepped in. Introducing himself as Detective Han Young-cheol of the Violent Crimes Unit, he reminded everyone that the victim's identity had not yet been confirmed. He also mentioned that unless the man was a related party, he couldn't allow access to the crime scene. Unseen by others, Haeyeon stood close and softly called out to her father. Her voice trembled with longing. She had wandered alone for 2 years, believing her family must be searching for her. Even though she was dead, she hadn't truly passed on. And now, if even her father couldn't see her, she didn't know what to do. She was terrified of being alone again. The system responded to her rising emotions, stating that her lingering attachment had grown stronger. Moved by her pain, Doyeon took her hand and began explaining everything. He recalled how, while driving on the highway, a disheveled woman covered in blood had suddenly blocked his car. He hadn't known it then, but that woman had already died. It had terrified him. He had never seen anything like it. Instinctively, he tried to run. But the woman had cried, begging not to be left alone. That woman's name was Haeun. He had come all this way because he wanted to help her. He admitted that he didn't know how to make anyone believe him. But somehow, he could see the dead. The detective tried to speak again, his voice sharp, but Haeun's father interrupted, still focused on his daughter. He asked if she was really there. Doyeon quietly confirmed she was. Without another word, her father turned and headed to his car. He said he was retrieving a doll that Haeun had cherished since childhood. Even after growing up, she couldn't sleep without it. He had carried it with him ever since she disappeared, hoping one day she would return. With trembling hands, he offered the doll to Doyeon and asked a simple question. If his daughter was truly here, could Doyeon ask her what the doll's name was? As the doll hovered in midair, seemingly lifted by an unseen force, everyone fell silent. No one could see Haeun, but the sight was enough to unsettle even the skeptical. Doyeon spoke quietly. The doll's name was Manhwa. Later, Doyeon and Haeun's father sat together, drinking juice in silence. The older man exhaled deeply. He confessed he had felt suffocated for so long. Now he could finally breathe. He thanked Doyeon from the bottom of his heart for helping his daughter and promised he would find a way to repay him. Doyeon simply said it was nothing. It was something he had wanted to do. Haeun's father spoke of his daughter with deep emotion. She had been a diligent child, burdened by a life born under a worthless father. Her life had been full of hardship, and even in death, she had been unable to rest in peace. It tore his heart apart. He wondered aloud what would happen to her now. Doyeon relayed a message from Haeun. She wanted to say that she was okay. She had worried about her father and younger sibling after disappearing. She knew what their lives would be like without her, and she couldn't leave without a final goodbye. She was grateful that her father had survived and kept going. If he could continue enduring life while thinking of her every now and then, that would be enough. She thanked him. She had been happy to be his daughter. She expressed her regret. There was no greater pain than leaving the world before one's parents. She was sorry for going first, and if she were ever to be reborn, she hoped it would be as his daughter again. Hearing her final words, her father trembled. He whispered that he, too, felt the same. Their Yinai had been happy. The monitor blinked with a message. Her on the Freeman Road. It marked a branching point. Though dead, she had been unable to pass on and had wandered the highway endlessly. But because of Doyeon's efforts, she was now free. Her soul was ready to move on. Still, her heart clung to lingering attachments. Whether Doyeon stayed with her was now his choice. He quietly called her name. The monitor displayed another warning. At the same time, you might regret that choice. Tears shimmered in Haeun's eyes. She turned to Doyeon and asked him what she should do. The system prompted him, is he going to ask her out on a date? Haeun's voice cracked with emotion. She admitted she didn't want to leave like this. Doyeon stood silently, his thoughts swirling in uncertainty. He questioned his own actions, unsure of what had led him to this point. He didn't know whether he was making a sound decision or simply being swept away by his emotions. Still, something inside him pushed him forward. Haeun gently reminded him of the words he had spoken just a day ago, that he would invite her to his place once the situation was over. Her voice carried both hope and a quiet urgency, as if holding on to that promise gave her the strength to stay. Doyeon, still grounded in the present danger, admitted that they still had to catch the person responsible for everything. It wasn't over yet. They needed more time. But more importantly, he needed her help. He reminded her of what she had said before, that she didn't want to disappear just yet. Holding on to that, he extended his invitation. If she truly didn't mind, would she like to come stay with him? Doubt flickered in his heart. He wondered if he was rushing into this, driven more by emotion than reason. Was he trying to ease her pain or his own? But Haeun's answer came without hesitation. She wanted to go with him. He felt relieved. Deep down, he hadn't wanted their connection to end like this, abrupt and incomplete. Later, Doyeon brought her to his apartment. As they arrived, he looked around nervously and confessed that the place was small and a little messy. He worried she might feel uncomfortable, but Haeun smiled warmly. Her own home, she said, had been small and old too. She didn't mind at all. Stepping into his home, she politely announced her arrival with a cheerful, "Excuse me." Inside, Doyeon watched as she took in the surroundings with wide-eyed wonder. She was surprised by how neat the apartment was. In fact, it was cleaner than she had expected. Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she said she was looking forward to living together. And with that, their strange and extraordinary cohabitation began. A poltergeist, an unseen presence that moved objects and made sounds, was now part of Doyeon's daily life. The supernatural had become personal. Not long after settling in, Haeun approached one of the ruined doors and tried to open it. Doyeon called out, asking her to hold on just a bit longer. She replied with determination, saying she was already trying her best. With great effort, the door creaked open. But as it did, she stumbled and fell clumsily to the floor. Doyeon rushed to her side, asking if she was all right. Haeun's face lit up with pride. She had opened the door herself. Even though her current form couldn't lift objects properly, this small achievement gave her hope. If she kept trying, maybe she could help out more. Maybe she could even cook a meal someday. Do-yeon reflected quietly. Ghosts were typically portrayed as beings who could pass through walls unhindered by the physical world. But in reality, Haeyeon seemed to have clear limitations. She could only influence her surroundings temporarily. It was a delicate, fragile presence. Even though she was eager to assist, Do-yeon told her that she didn't need to worry about the housework. He was capable of cooking for himself. She didn't have to burden herself. Still, Haeyeon wasn't ready to give up. She said there might be something she could do to help. She didn't want to sit idly by. Even something small would make her feel useful. She recalled how he mostly ate ramen and suggested that maybe she could try preparing something simple. Though he appreciated her sentiment, Do-yeon reminded her they needed to be cautious. She paused, uncertain. He gently told her not to overexert herself. If she needed anything at any time, she only needed to tell him. He also acknowledged that it might be difficult for her to visit her family now. After all, he was the only one who could see her. There was no need for her to carry the weight of trying to appear strong or helpful. He wanted her to be at ease, to feel at home. Even if things weren't easy, they could work through the challenges together, one step at a time. Moved by his words, Haeyeon responded softly, her heart calm. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. A moment of realization struck Haeyeon as she paused and thought. Living together going forward, wasn't this technically cohabitation? The more she thought about it, the more it felt real. From this point on, they would be sharing the same space, living under the same roof. Since the day her body was discovered, she had never returned to the highway. And now that she hadn't disappeared even during daylight hours, it seemed safe for her to move around freely. Later, Do-yeon's father contacted him. He said he had another engagement and asked if he could visit with Haeyeon's sister at a later time. With gratitude and sincere apologies, he promised to visit soon. Before ending the call, he insisted on giving Do-yeon some money from his wallet, saying he couldn't accept the situation otherwise. Do-yeon finally felt like he could catch his breath. Although the deleted version of events still weighed on his mind, there was no clear path to pursue it any further. The game remained silent, no updates, no new information. He looked over his expenses, housing at 40, communication at 10, savings at 20, living expenses at 50, and others at 25. The total stood at negative 480,000 won. His most immediate concern was how to manage his living expenses. He knew he'd have to return to the police station soon and also make up for the work time he had missed. He reminded himself to turn on his broadcast that night. Despite his exhaustion, he had to stay consistent. Still, he thought about getting a little rest first. He asked Haeyeon about her plans, wondering if she would also take a break. She responded hesitantly, uncertain. He suggested they sleep for now. Offering her comfort, he said he would sleep in the kitchen and told her to wake him if anything happened. But she quickly objected, saying she'd rather sleep outside. Do-yeon gently insisted. She was the guest, and it would be rude to make her feel uncomfortable. He wished her a good rest. As he left the room, he kept the door slightly ajar. Haeyeon noticed this small gesture, felt intentional, an act of subtle kindness. Of course, she thought that's the kind of person Do-yeon was. A faint scent of fabric softener lingered in the air. The house was neat, quiet, and warm. It felt strangely comforting. She tried to recall the last time she had felt such peace, but the memory was distant. Her mind drifted back to her past. She remembered sitting with her friends, listening to them share stories about their relationships. One friend vented about her boyfriend getting upset. Another scolded her playfully, questioning why she stayed with him if she felt that way. Then they turned their attention to Haeyeon. They asked how she was doing and what happened with the senior she liked. She replied calmly she had rejected him. It just didn't feel right. They weren't compatible. Her friends were shocked. He was good-looking, wealthy even. Why let that go? She explained that between studying and part-time work, she had no time. The youngest in her family had just started elementary school. She needed to focus on earning a scholarship. There had been so many things she wanted to do. One friend commented that it felt like a waste. This was supposed to be the most beautiful time in life, a time to enjoy and explore freely. Back in the present, Haeyeon reflected on those words. Like everyone else, she had wanted to date, to travel together, to live fully. She had made a bucket list, a secret list of hopes and dreams, and kept it safe. She believed that if she worked hard and polished herself, her efforts would eventually shine. But now she wondered if she had made the wrong choice. She should have tried it all, just like her friends had said. It all felt so meaningless now. Her thoughts wandered to the graduation album, tucked away somewhere. Quietly, she made her way to the kitchen, where Do-yeon lay sleeping. She called out to him, asking if he was awake. He was the only one who had seen her, the only one who had pulled her away from that lonely highway. Her thoughts returned once again to a memory. One of her friends had once asked what kind of guy she preferred. At the time, she had replied shyly, maybe someone a little nerdy. Her friends had reacted in disbelief. A nerd? She had laughed, continuing to describe the kind of person she dreamed of. Someone without too many female friends, with decent muscles, who didn't know how to dress but still looked good when he tried. Someone innocent but not naive. Someone kind but only to her. Someone gentle. Someone she could lean on. Her friends had teased her. Was someone like that even real? It would be easier to find a unicorn. Still, she had smiled. She liked people who were pure-hearted. Now standing in the quiet apartment, she smiled to herself. There was one. She thought Doyen looked better with his bangs pushed back, and in that moment, she whispered a silent thank you for saving her. But the guilt still lingered. She felt bad for being nothing more than a burden, for always receiving and never giving. If she had been an ordinary person, she would have found a way to repay him. Suddenly, Doyen reached out in his sleep, grabbing her hand and pulling her close. Startled, she gasped, confused. Was he talking in his sleep? She tried to back away. But then he murmured, still asleep, his voice trembling. He requested to someone named Hyojeon to don't abandon him. The scene transitioned into the warm glow of a cozy room where Doyen sat in front of his monitor, live streaming a playthrough of a visual novel titled Cute Girl Dating Simulation. The game unfolded with delicate emotional tension as the female character hesitated, her feelings tangled in lingering doubt. Yet the bond between the characters deepened. Despite complications, they reassured each other. One expressing regret, the other offering comfort, saying everything would be fine. As the narrative progressed, the player character in the game leaned in gently and kissed the girl, symbolizing a shift toward a more intimate, committed relationship. The story aimed to simulate the emotions tied to real-life dating and even long-term connection, like marriage, by guiding the player through choices aligned with each character's personality. Watching the scene unfold, Doyen suddenly felt a tear roll down his cheek. The emotional intensity of the game had caught him off guard. One of his viewers, Baraka, immediately noticed and broke into laughter, teasing Doyen for crying during a dating sim. Another viewer, Nakshir Meji, admitted that the moment had touched him too, even causing him to tear up a little. Embarrassed, Doyen denied crying, insisting it was just a yawn, but his voice cracked slightly as he tried to laugh it off. Still, he praised the developers, acknowledging how well the game had delivered emotionally, far beyond expectations for its genre. He reminded the chat that tonight was originally scheduled for a horror game. Playing back-to-back visual novels wasn't the plan, but he explained that shifting genres once in a while helped keep the streams fresh. A change in pace was not only refreshing, but also an opportunity to observe different storytelling techniques, which he described as a form of informal study. Suddenly, an alert popped up. A viewer named Yudi had donated 10,000 won along with a playful message, is he perhaps studying romance with a dating sim? Doyen grinned, thanking Yudi for the donation while dismissing the idea with a lighthearted laugh. Even so, there was a trace of lingering amusement in his expression. Meanwhile, Heian sat quietly nearby, observing everything. Watching Doyen interact with his viewers and immerse himself in a completely different world, she realized she was witnessing a side of him she hadn't seen before. Until now, they hadn't had much time to talk or share personal details. She found herself curious. What kind of student had Doyen been? What was his past like? And more pressingly, who was the person named Kwon Hyojeon? As the stream came to a close, Doyen waved at the camera and told his viewers they would meet again tomorrow. Turning off the stream, he glanced at Heian and apologized if the noise had disturbed her. She quickly shook her head, assuring him that it wasn't loud at all. In fact, she admitted that she had genuinely enjoyed watching the stream. Her eyes twinkled as she teasingly brought up the tear he had shed, calling it unexpectedly cute. Doyen flushed with embarrassment, again defending himself by claiming he had just yawned. Then, remembering his pending editing work, he told her he might have to stay up late to finish it. His tone was apologetic, not wanting her to feel uncomfortable with his late-night routine. Heian gave a reassuring smile, telling him she would stay quiet and not disturb him. She added that he could pretend she wasn't even there. Her words were gentle, filled with subtle warmth. Despite everything that had happened, this moment felt strangely normal, almost like a glimpse into a life they hadn't expected to share. As the evening deepened into night, the quiet hum of the computer filled the space between them. The warmth of the room, the afterglow of the stream, and the soft rhythm of shared silence created a fragile, peaceful atmosphere that neither of them wanted to disturb. As the monitor's glow flickered softly in the dim room, Doyen leaned back in his chair and sighed. He reminded himself aloud that even if it didn't seem like it, he was managing just fine on his own. Then, almost as an afterthought, he suggested that maybe he could finish editing quickly and step outside for some fresh air. His eyes drifted toward Heian as he asked if there was anywhere she'd like to go. Startled, Heian quickly shook her head and insisted she was perfectly fine staying right there. But Doyen admitted feeling a bit cramped and gently nudged her, hoping she'd join him outside. Heian paused, then said something she had clearly been holding onto for a long time. She wanted to see the night sea. It had been a dream of hers, a small wish from a quietly written bucket list. Going to the beach at night, finding a boyfriend, visiting an amusement park, and someday opening her own store. The sea under moonlight had always felt like something magical to her. Doyen offered to look for a nearby beach, but even as he said it, reality pressed in. The monitor lit up with a cold assessment. She wanted to go to the night sea, but time and money were tight. His editing wasn't finished yet, and freelance work still needed to be found. A compromise seemed more realistic. 4 options appeared: stretch the plan and go to the sea anyway, settle for a nearby reservoir, choose a lake park, or go to an indoor fishing spot. The choices were logical, designed for efficiency, but none of them truly captured her wish. In a quiet moment of thought, Doyeon considered the structure of the world he now found himself in. This simulation of style like a dating game came with risks. The person he was growing close to had already passed away. One misstep could lead to something far worse than rejection. The rules said to choose from the options given, but this wasn't just a game anymore. It was real. Haeyeon was real. The weight of that thought sank deep. Haeyeon's soft voice pulled him out of his spiral. She had noticed the troubled look on his face and asked if something was wrong. Doyeon quickly apologized, brushing it off as just being lost in thought while considering where to go. He added that it made sense to check options online first, to which she responded with relief, happy it wasn't anything serious. Then, after a moment of hesitation, he spoke. Though he knew it wasn't one of the listed choices, he suggested going to a nearby reservoir instead of the sea. It would still be peaceful and by the water. As soon as he said it, he felt the words escape too fast, wondering if he had just gone off script. The monitor responded harshly. He had selected something outside the given options. It would now be reevaluated. A penalty was imminent. He panicked and tried to take it back, but it was too late. The system informed him that the next choice would carry consequences. To his surprise, Haeyeon smiled and agreed to go to the reservoir. But beneath that smile, something had shifted. The monitor noted that her affection level had slightly decreased. They arrived by the riverside, the air cool and still, with the water reflecting the soft moonlight. Haeyeon's face lit up with wonder as she looked around, saying it was more beautiful than she had expected. Doyeon quietly admitted his relief and apologized that it wasn't the beach she had longed for. But Haeyeon reassured him. Being there was enough. She felt grateful and didn't want him to feel burdened, especially since he was busy. Still, since they had come all this way, she asked if they could walk just a little farther together. Doyeon noted how he had followed one of the official options this time just in case. Thankfully, it seemed to work out. The monitor confirmed that Haeyeon was in a good mood and her affection points had stabilized. He couldn't help but think about the strange rules that bound this world. Words kept slipping from his mouth whenever he didn't follow the preset choices. Was this really still just a game? And if it wasn't, what would happen to Haeyeon when it ended? They walked together side by side, the silence between them slowly filling the ease. Haeyeon turned to him and wondered aloud how old he might be. Doyeon answered he was 24. She was surprised. When she died, she had been 22, which technically made them the same age now. It left her unsure of how to refer to him. A friend, maybe? He suggested they keep things as they were, saying it might feel too forced to change anything suddenly. Then, realizing how little they actually knew about each other, he asked about her past. She playfully turned the question back on him, curious what he thought. He guessed she might have been a college student. Impressed, she confirmed it, saying he was more observant than he looked. He explained that people their age were usually either studying or working part-time jobs. With a playful huff, she declared herself a top scholarship student. Doyeon, surprised, admitted she didn't seem the type. That remark made her raise an eyebrow. He quickly tried to explain himself, saying her vibe didn't match because she was so pretty. She laughed, asking if he had a habit of charming girls with that innocent look. Flustered, he denied it, stammering that he had only thought she was pretty just the way she was. Then, without warning, she asked about the night before, whether he had hugged her while sleeping. He froze. His voice cracked as he insisted it must have been sleep-talking. Her eyes sparkled as she teased him again, noting how red his face had turned. He pleaded for her to stop teasing, but inside, something warm settled. Even though she'd appeared out of nowhere, the time spent with her brought him peace. A strange comfort had grown in his heart. The monitor chimed in once more. Her affection level had slightly increased. Doyeon stared ahead, thinking to himself that maybe downloading this game hadn't been such a bad idea after all. Then Haeyeon spoke again, her tone softer this time. She wanted to ask something not serious, she said, but it was clear it weighed on her. She mentioned a graduation album and the name Kwon Hyo-jeon. Before Doyeon could respond, something snapped. Haeyeon suddenly vanished. Panic surged in his chest. He shouted her name. Looked around in every direction. She had disappeared without a trace. His mind raced, and she run off onto the highway again. The monitor cut in coldly. Matchmaking was successful. If he didn't want to continue dating her, he was free to exit the location. Her affection level was now marked as despair. A chill filled the air. A terrifying apparition emerged before him. Doyeon screamed in horror as the presence loomed. This life-risking dating simulation had only just begun. Doyeon screamed in shock, his eyes fixed on the figure before him. His mind raced in confusion, trying to comprehend what was happening to the head he was seeing. It seemed to move unnaturally. Then, without warning, he lost balance and fell to the ground. Again, a scream tore from his throat as he struggled to recover. Haeyeon rushed over, alarmed, trying to reach him. She demanded to know what was wrong, urging him to pull himself together, reminding him she was right there beside him. Her voice trembled as she pleaded for Doyeon to respond. But as he turned to look at her, his eyes widened. The person standing there wasn't Haeyeon anymore. A different, ghostly figure had taken her place. His thoughts spiraled into panic. The sight before him made no sense. Was this another character? He tried to calm himself, remembering how he had spoken to Haeyeon earlier. Maybe communication was still possible. First, he needed the phone and the options. But before he could act, the ghost's dismembered head reached behind him, its hand shooting forward toward Doyeon. Reflexively, he pushed the head away with a cry. Terror gripped him as he mentally begged for the nightmare to end. The monitor in front of him offered an option: simply run away. It was the only thing that made sense anymore. This situation had gone far beyond what he could handle. For someone like him, this was too much. He remembered the game's rule: he could opt out of the date anytime. Haeyeon's sudden disappearance confused him, but his decision was made. He would leave and try to find her later. But the monitor responded coldly. His choice drastically decreased her affection level. It dropped from despair to hatred. The ghostly head groaned with a guttural sound, and the monitor urged him to escape immediately. Before he could flee, strands of hair coiled around his ankle. The ghost had grabbed him. He apologized through trembling lips, admitting he was simply too afraid. Panic overtook him as he shouted for it to go away. In a sudden burst of violence, the ghost hurled Doyeon into the water. Sinking beneath the surface, he pleaded to be released. Despite knowing he was submerged, his instincts betrayed him. He gasped for air. Water flooded into his lungs, burning his throat. The pain was overwhelming. Fear paralyzed him, yet his heart continued to beat. He wished it would stop. All he could do was pray for a quicker end. The monitor delivered the final message: Doyeon had died. Moments later, he found himself back at the same eerie location where the ghost had first appeared. His thoughts drifted to Haeyeon. He had believed, just maybe, they could grow closer. But now he realized how naive that hope had been. This was Mion City, a game filled with heroines, each with unique personalities. New characters could appear at any time. Confused and frustrated, he questioned everything. He had been hit by a car, burned alive, and now drowned. Installing the game really such a grave mistake? Offered a breakdown of his failure. He had been on a date with Haeyeon when a strange figure appeared. What seemed like a moving human head threw him into panic. He froze, ran without a plan, and was ultimately dragged to his death. But this time, things could be different. The system suggested possible actions: run away faster, attempt communication, strike it, or remain still. The ghost reappeared once more. Doyeon, recalling how fleeing had only led to meaningless death, resolved to try communication instead. But uncertainty clouded his judgment. Should he speak to the head or the body? Was he supposed to remove the tape first? Deciding to move carefully, he approached. He began by reassuring the entity, expressing that he wasn't a threat. The monitor acknowledged his choice, highlighting his attempt to communicate. He admitted to not understanding the backstory, but still asked if the ghost needed help. Determined to ease her distress, he pressed forward. The ghost made a motion, almost as if trying to speak. Doyeon wondered if she wanted to talk, if it was safe to remove the tape. He gently asked if she was okay. The monitor prompted another choice: run, wait, or try to reattach the head. Doyeon stood still, his thoughts spinning. This was his third death, but instead of fear, a strange numbness crept in. Or perhaps curiosity had overtaken his fear. Taking a breath, he tried to understand her pain. He needed time, just a moment, to consider why she was in such torment, why she wandered this reservoir in such a state. The monitor lit up with new text. His choice had significantly raised her affection level. Her mental state stabilized. The ghost slowly transformed before his eyes, revealing a beautiful young woman beneath a haunting appearance. With a faint, trembling voice, she begged to be freed from the place. The monitor announced the end of the midnight date. It began calculating the romantic score. With 80 points gained, even after a death penalty, Doyeon had earned a romance rank of B. Despite the lingering unease, the second date with her had reached its end. Doyeon stood frozen as Haeyeon's voice echoed in concern, urging him to calm down. She noticed something was wrong and asked if he had anything he wanted to say. But Doyeon didn't seem to hear her. His focus had shifted elsewhere. He was now speaking to other ghosts, trying to assure them that he wasn't suspicious and asking if they needed help. Watching this unfold, Haeyeon called his name again. Her thoughts turned solemn. She had always known a farewell would eventually come. She wondered who Doyeon was talking to. Could it be that black, shadowy presence again? Perhaps another spirit like her? Accepting the truth in her heart, she was dead and Doyeon was alive. With each passing day, she felt herself fading, walking instinctively without purpose. Yet during that time, Doyeon had reached out to her. The moments they shared brought joy, comfort, and warmth, so much that it made her resent herself for being a burden. Even after seeing her family again, she had wanted to stay just a bit longer in this world. But now she feared she might have become invisible. The suddenness of it all felt unbearable. She didn't want to disappear without saying anything. She called out to Doyeon again, yelling his name as she saw him approaching something dangerous. Her thoughts spiraled. Maybe she was no different from those wandering beings. Maybe she, too, had no right to stay by Doyeon's side. Yet deep down, she knew her desire to remain was selfish. Just then, Doyeon turned and spotted her. He rushed over, relieved to see her, admitting he thought she had vanished. Confused by his reaction, Haeyeon hesitated. Doyeon noticed the tears welling in her eyes and asked if she was okay. In her thoughts, Haeyeon knew it was wrong to feel this way, but she couldn't help the greed surfacing in her heart. She asked him quietly if he was afraid of her. Doyeon, though surprised, admitted he wasn't particularly scared. In fact, he was more frightened when she wasn't by his side. That answer struck her. She tried to explain that it wasn't about fear. It was about boundaries. She was dead, and he was alive. Was it really okay for her to stay with him? If she was a burden, she promised she would leave and not cause trouble. But Doyeon confessed that he needed her. He couldn't fully explain why, but he needed her help to deal with the ghostly problems he was facing. They both had a lot to share, and he suggested they talk more on their way back. As they walked together, Haeyeon reflected. Even if their story seemed destined to end, maybe for now, it was okay to be a little greedy. While heading home by car, the conversation shifted. Haeyeon confirmed that Doyeon had been asked for help by a headless woman. Doyeon nodded and asked if she had seen her too. Haeyeon replied she had, but to her, the woman appeared only as a shapeless mass with no clear features. It seemed to her like Doyeon was trying to comfort the ghost. She wondered if he wasn't scared. Doyeon admitted he was afraid. When a dead person suddenly appeared, it was only natural. The image of a crawling, severed head and a headless body chasing after him was terrifying. But above all, he had been scared when Haeyeon disappeared again, possibly onto the highway. Seeing her again had been a massive relief. Haeyeon then asked about the help Doyeon had mentioned earlier. He hesitated and said it was hard to explain at the moment. That only made her more curious, and she insisted he tell her. She offered to help with anything. Doyeon promised to explain later when the time was right. In his thoughts, Doyeon recalled the image of the ghost, the body wrapped in tape, the wounds scattered across her frame and the dismembered parts. It reminded him of the brutal dismemberment cases he had seen in the news. Getting involved might be dangerous, but turning away from someone asking for help just because of fear felt even worse. He couldn't abandon someone who was already suffering. He admitted to himself that he wasn't even managing his own life well. Yet now, as Haeyeon looked at him, she noticed how lost in thought he appeared. She asked if it was because of the person he had mentioned earlier, and Doyeon confirmed it. Haeyeon gently reminded him that his kindness was both his strength and weakness. He tended to harm himself by being too steadfast. Doyeon seemed surprised, but she pointed out the obvious. Who else would worry that much about a ghost suddenly appearing? She urged him to not take on everything alone. If he truly believed in something, he should pursue it. But if it became too hard, it was okay to run away. It was okay to be more honest with himself. Coming from someone who had been saved by his warmth, she emphasized that taking care of himself was most important. Doyeon reflected on her words. There were still life points left. Admittedly, he was scared. But if he could pull someone out of hell with his help, wouldn't it be worth trying? Maybe. If there was a god, he would be rewarded for all this hardship. Soon after, the two returned to Doyeon's residence. As they entered, the landlord immediately confronted Doyeon, announcing that the rent and management fees were going up. Prices everywhere had increased, and the landlord claimed he had been patient enough. Now it was Doyeon's turn to adapt. Doyeon, caught off guard, argued that the sudden hike was too much. The landlord insisted that everyone was raising prices, and if Doyeon couldn't pay, he would need to find a new place. He doubted Doyeon even had that option. Doyeon pleaded for more time, explaining that things were already tight starting this month. The landlord sighed and said he would allow the old rate just for this month, but from next month onward, Doyeon had to adjust. As a senior in life, he advised Doyeon to find a proper job, complaining that the internet was ruining today's youth. Frustrated, Haeyeon muttered that it was ridiculous to raise the rent in such a small basement. The landlord's tone annoyed her. It felt like bullying. Doyeon, clearly distressed, turned to Haeyeon, unsure of what to do. At this rate, he feared he might actually be kicked out. Doyeon made a call, reaching out to someone after seeing a job listing. He assured them that he could handle ad editing and offered to send a different portfolio. The call ended on a positive note. Back at home, Haeyeon suggested contacting her father and even offered her sig-up money. But Doyeon quickly turned down the idea. Grateful but firm, he explained that it was his responsibility and that he'd manage just like he always had. He stepped out, saying he was going to the convenience store, leaving Haeyeon feeling helpless and useless. At the store, Doyeon picked up some food. The shopkeeper processed his items, 3 cup noodles and 1 instant rice, charging him 8,500 won. As the transaction completed, a notification from his bank popped up, showing his balance dropping to 98,671. He noted that rent was still due, but for now, he could manage this month. He consoled himself with the thought that at least Haeyeon didn't need food, but the idea of asking for help crossed his mind. He recalled a past argument where he had begged someone to leave Hyojang alone. He had done everything asked, and even his friends were dragged in. The shame from his mother still lingered. That memory solidified his decision. He couldn't ask for help now. With a heavy schedule, he also had to visit the police station the next day for a follow-up investigation. He decided to focus on the immediate tasks. There would be time to worry later. If necessary, he could always take on a same-day part-time job. He had made it this far alone. Later during the live stream, the chat filled with comments. Some mocked him, others encouraged. Doyeon felt frustrated. It wasn't that he lacked skill. How could anyone win when the enemy's top at 10 kills? Meanwhile, Haeyeon checked the time. It was already 9 p.m. and Doyeon hadn't slept at all after his editing. The broadcast was running, and she worried he was pushing himself too hard. On such little food, he was bound to break down. She wished she could interact with the world more freely to help him. Suddenly, she let out a sharp noise, startled by his sensation. She realized that if she focused, she could control her strength, though still unable to lift a frying pan. Her desire to help strengthened. If only she were alive, she could have supported him better. Still, she promised herself that with enough practice, she would find a way. Back on the stream, someone asked if Doyeon had reached Sungjae. Doyeon admitted he hadn't. He had tried calling and visiting, but couldn't make contact. Since then, there had been no response. All he could do now was hope Sungjae was safe. The chat turned dark. Viewers mentioned a news story about a female body found in the nearby mountains. Some speculated kidnapping, others joked about a ghost reveal in the burial site. Doyeon was taken aback. He had been at the police station for over an hour, but nothing like this had been mentioned. As the broadcast continued, online news articles confirmed the discovery. A woman's body near Freedom Road, reported by someone who claimed a ghost had told them. The police had launched an investigation. Doyeon's eyes widened as he read the details. The chat filled with cynical comments, with some viewers suggesting the reporter was likely the real killer. Others mocked the idea of a ghost leading someone to a body. Doyeon stared at the screen, confused by what was unfolding. During his questioning, there had been no mention of this. His friends noticed his sudden seriousness. Some asked if he was okay or hurt. Doyeon's thoughts turned anxious. There was still another investigation to go. What if he was wrongly accused? What if his personal information got leaked? Would anyone believe his side of the story if things spiraled out of control? Just then, Haeyeon shouted in excitement. She had possessed a doll, Manga, and the others noticed. The chat exploded with reactions. Viewers were confused, amused, and suspicious. Some wondered if it was a prank. Others joked about hearing a woman's voice. Doyeon quickly ended the broadcast, saying something urgent had come up. Haeyeon began to panic, fearing she had ruined everything. She apologized repeatedly, saying she never meant for it to happen. She only wanted to help in any way possible. But Doyeon suddenly burst into laughter. He couldn't stop himself. The sight of her inside the doll, trying so hard, struck him as both absurd and touching. Haeyeon was stunned. Doyeon thanked her. Despite everything he was dealing with, here she was trying so hard for him. He realized how long he had been stuck inside his own worries. Haeyeon, too, felt grateful. She had someone so dependable right beside her all along. Doyeon's mind cleared. When Haeyeon asked if they could discuss a new issue together, he agreed immediately and encouraged her to tell him anything. He reflected on how long it had been since he had asked someone for help. Later, as they stepped outside, rain poured heavily. Haeyeon asked if he was sure he was okay. Doyeon said it would work out somehow. He couldn't ignore someone who had asked for help, and letting things go unresolved left him uneasy. He told Haeyeon she could wait at home, but she refused. She didn't want to get wet and suggested they sit in the car instead. Doyeon agreed. As they walked, Haeyeon playfully asked if the ghost Doyeon was going to meet was pretty. He stammered at the question, clearly caught off guard, prompting her to tease him further. Elsewhere, in a quiet room, a man was being briefed. A secretary explained the details. Choi Doyeon, 24 years old, an unknown internet broadcaster, had allegedly found a woman's body by claiming a ghost told him. The authorities already knew the woman's identity. Even more bizarre, according to insiders, the doll had flown through the air right in front of them. The man expressed disbelief but was intrigued. He asked for an ad to be sent to Doyeon. Wanting to meet him personally, his curiosity had been piqued. Rain poured outside as Doyeon and Haeyeon sat quietly in the car. The moment reminded Haeyeon of the first time they had met. Back then, she had felt like she was at her limit, ready to give up everything. But meeting Doyeon had pulled her back. She reflected that perhaps the ghost they were helping now needed just as much support as she once had. She hoped Doyeon wouldn't overdo it. Doyeon had been thinking about the same thing for days. He felt fortunate that the first ghost he met was her. Their initial meeting had been cold, but now he couldn't imagine her not being around. Haeyeon suddenly brought up an old question, one he hadn't answered. She asked again if the female ghost had been beautiful. Flustered, Doyeon stammered. Haeyeon pressed him with playful insistence. Caught off guard, he finally declared that Haeyeon was the prettiest person he had ever seen. A notification confirmed that her favorability had significantly increased. She accepted his answer with a smile. Doyeon hoped his reply had been good enough. Seeing her happy gave him reassurance. After chatting, he had organized his thoughts and decided that if things escalated, he would ask Haeyeon's father for help. When he explained the situation to him, he agreed to assist. If the victim's family came forward, they might be able to prevent the worst-case scenario. Catching the true culprit would close the case. With the magnifying glass item and other yet unlocked tools, that was now his priority. His LP had been steadily increasing, and once the date ended, new items would become available. Even the live broadcast could be turned into good publicity if handled correctly. As their GPS announced their arrival, Doyeon reassured Haeyeon not to worry. He reminded himself to think of it as a game, something he was good at. Haeyeon asked again if he was okay and suggested turning back. Doyeon, trying to sound confident, said he was ready and had practiced the simulation. There was no need to worry. Privately, Haeyeon reflected on how much Doyeon had been through. She understood the pain he carried and secretly wished he didn't have to go through it. She scolded herself for feeling that way. Still, she reminded herself to stay confident. Turning back now would only leave him more anxious. They had to see this through. The monitor updated. The second midnight date had begun. Doyeon noted that while ghosts could see him, he couldn't always see them. Online, he had read that stronger ghost energy could obscure weaker ones, but the accuracy of that information was uncertain. The system confirmed that her favorability remained at a normal level. Despite how unsettling things got, he reminded himself not to run or deny her presence. He needed to collect as much information as he could through conversation. He began to speak softly, reintroducing himself and mentioning they had met the day before. He sensed she needed help and wanted to understand her situation. The monitor confirmed the start of the midnight date, but something felt off like deja vu. The ghost was slow to respond, and strangely, no dialogue options appeared. This wasn't like other dates. As he looked more closely, he noticed something alarming. Her head was missing. It had been with her before. He wondered how they could talk without it. He called out, asking if her head hadn't come with her, then spotted it nearby, watching from a distance. He tried to engage again, asking to chat and requesting her help in understanding what was happening. But she didn't respond. He asked her to hold the umbrella, hoping for a reaction, then pleaded again, assuring he meant no harm. Yet she kept avoiding him. Doyeon's thoughts raced. Was she intentionally avoiding him? Had he done something wrong? He was sure he hadn't. The monitor narrated his internal resolution to help the ghost who had suffered alone. But her head, now separated, lingered nearby as if guarding her. Perhaps she was simply embarrassed. Suddenly, an interaction prompt appeared. Option A, wait patiently and avoid pressure. Option B, calm her down and assure her he came to help. Doyeon decided B was safer, assuming she might be afraid. A penalty message triggered. The options had been updated. Now the screen displayed harsher choices. Option A, shout at her without sounding annoying. Option B, act frustrated and threaten to leave. Option C, belittle her. Option D, threaten to take her body hostage with a vile expression. Doyeon panicked. None of the choices were appropriate. He realized that another poor selection could lead to a more severe penalty. With no better choice, he picked what seemed like the lesser evil. He warned her it was her last chance. If she didn't come now, he would take her body with him. It was a desperate bluff. The monitor displayed the line, threaten her by taking her body hostage with a vile expression. Doyeon echoed the words, resigning himself. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad either. Doyeon, though visibly nervous, still tried to handle the situation by teasingly suggesting that maybe this was okay in its own strange way. But the moment the ghost heard that, she froze and turned red with embarrassment. Doyeon, realizing things had gotten awkward, hesitated, unsure of what to do next. He wondered if he should try to smooth things over. It already felt like she was upset. With choices like these, he didn't know what the right move was. He decided to apologize and clear things up, saying he was just trying to lighten the mood with a joke. Right then, a notification from the game informed him. She feels embarrassed. Her favorability increases slightly. Doyeon blinked in surprise. Her favorability went up, not down. He couldn't understand how that happened. Suddenly, the ghost revealed her real identity. Doyeon asked her gently if she was okay. She looked like she was about to say something, but then broke into tears. Doyeon urged her to speak, confused but concerned. Through her sobs, she muttered a single word, trash. Doyeon blinked, caught off guard, and asked if she could repeat that. Meanwhile, in another part of the map, Haeyeon sat alone waiting for Doyeon. Quietly to herself, she said it was better to wait than to be beside him. She wondered if Doyeon was doing okay. The scene then returned to Doyeon and the ghosts. Tearfully, the ghost began to speak again, hesitating with every word. She didn't know what would happen now. She was unsure of what to do. Doyeon leaned in, trying to understand, but her words left him confused. She said she thought he might ask for something in return, because earlier he had said that her body would be enough. Immediately, Doyeon denied it. He explained it was just a joke to ease the mood. He truly wanted to help her, genuinely. No strings attached. The ghost's voice trembled. She said it was okay. She knew there was no such thing as kindness without a reason. Still, she would do whatever she could. And then, almost pleading, she asked him to help her escape from that place. Once again, that same heavy feeling returned to Doyeon, the one he had experienced with Haeyeon. He wondered what this girl had endured to say something like that with such a look in her eyes. He couldn't help but think, what kind of game was this? He looked at her sincerely. Ever since he heard her request for help yesterday, he hadn't been able to stop thinking about it. He assured her he wanted to help as much as was within his power, but to do that, he needed to understand her situation. He asked why she avoided him. He quickly added that she only needed to share what she was comfortable with. The girl hesitated and then nervously confessed that she had been afraid that he would run away after seeing her, just a disembodied head crawling around. Even she found it disgusting. If the only person who had appeared ran away in fear, she didn't think she could take it anymore. The thought alone was unbearable, so out of fear, she chose not to approach him. Doyen's heart sank with guilt. He remembered the moment he had kicked her head. Quietly, he apologized. The ghost looked at him and asked what he was apologizing for. He brushed it off, saying he was talking to himself. Then he introduced himself as Choi Doyen and asked her name. She replied, saying her name was Kang Sai-eun. In his thoughts, Doyen saw her as someone who had been endlessly waiting for anyone who extend a helping hand. He told her not to worry. He wasn't doing this with any hidden motive. He might not look it, but he didn't lie. What she needed most right now was a single promise, a word of assurance. So he said it. He was going to save her. For sure. She didn't have to be anxious anymore or look at him with suspicion. He believed that just those words might be enough for her. Sai-eun looked at him, uncertain, and asked if she could really trust him. Doyen quickly answered, admitting he might not seem reliable and that he wasn't particularly special, but he still promised. Overwhelmed with emotion, Sai-eun leaned into his chest and began to cry. Doyen gently wiped her tears, apologizing because it must have been hard for her to do it on her own. Sai-eun thanked him softly and apologized in return. Doyen suggested they move to the nearby pavilion. It was getting colder in the rain. She agreed, her voice still shaking, saying that sounded good. Doyen noticed the tape wrapped around her and asked if it was uncomfortable. He offered to help remove it. Sai-eun looked a bit startled but nodded, saying she would appreciate it. It felt suffocating. Doyen leaned in and examined the tape, saying he just needed a moment. Sai-eun reassured him, saying he could take his time, and apologized again. The rain continued to fall as the two quietly prepared to move to shelter, one searching for answers, and the other finally daring to hope. Doyen carefully searched for the end of the tape, struggling to find it in the dim light. It was too dark to see clearly. After checking her back and finding nothing, he finally spotted it and paused. The end of the tape was near her chest. He hesitated, suggesting that maybe they should leave it on instead. But Sai-eun responded quickly, saying it was fine if he was okay with it. She asked for his help again. Doyen admitted he couldn't take it off alone. As he stood there, thoughts raced through his mind. Now wasn't the time to be distracted by personal feelings. It would be rude to hesitate. With a deep breath, he told her he would remove the tape as gently as possible. Internally, he reminded himself to put his emotions aside. What mattered now was helping her. As he reached forward, just about to peel the tape near her chest, a sudden voice interrupted the moment. Heian had arrived. She stood there, her expression unreadable, and asked Doyen what he was doing. The rain continued to fall softly around them as tension silently filled the space. At the investigation office, Yang Kil reviewed the scene footage once again. The report detailed severe trauma from a vehicle collision, fatal injuries concentrated on the victim's head and chest. The first caller had been Choi Doyen, a 23-year-old from Donggu, Yandong, Gyeonggi province, who had been live streaming at the time. Forensics confirmed Doyen was either serving in the military or on leave during the incident, with no direct connection to the victim. Yet the strangest part remained. The footage clearly showed a doll floating in the sky. Just then, Izam approached, casually offering to grab coffee. When Yangchil asked if he was paying, Izam laughed it off, claiming it was just a stereotype that seniors should cover the bill. He also commented on Yangchil's jacket, saying it didn't suit him. Yangchil brushed it off, clearly worn out. Izam noticed the exhaustion and asked if everything was okay. Yangchil admitted he wished he had two bodies to deal with everything. The case had remained unsolved for a year, and with the media frenzy surrounding it, pressure from higher-ups had only increased. It was driving him to the edge, but Yangchil stood firm. He refused to let innocent people be treated like criminals. Someone who had been at the scene had to come forward. The real perpetrator, he was certain, was someone else entirely. Military records showed Doyen had neither leave nor absence during the incident. The details given by the victim had aligned perfectly with the forensic findings. Izem shared his belief that the case might reveal something far bigger. He brought up the floating doll seen during Doyen's live stream, admitting that although most dismissed it as clickbait, he'd heard a distinct female voice. He wondered if the victim had possessed the doll. Yangchil, though still skeptical, admitted he couldn't explain what he'd seen. Their conversation was cut short by a call. Izem received instructions to head to a news site immediately. A luggage case had washed up at the reservoir, and inside was a human head. Shocked, Yangchil reacted quickly, and both headed out. Meanwhile, Doyen met up with Heian and introduced her to Sai-eun, whom he had first encountered a few days prior on the expressway. He guessed her age to be around 22. The mood was awkward, with everyone struggling to interact naturally. Doyen attempted to break the tension by asking Sai-eun her age. She replied that she was 21, and when Doyen revealed he was 24, she noted he was the older one. Sai-eun remarked that whatever Doyen was doing, she wouldn't interfere. Heian observed that they seemed closer than expected and clarified that the goal was just to remove the tape, nothing more. Doyeon confirmed that was his only intention, explaining that the tape looked uncomfortable. Heian insisted on removing it herself, and as she peeled it off, Saeyeon winced in pain. Heian apologized, urging her to hold on as it was almost done. Doyeon watched, realizing that ghosts could apparently interact with physical objects. He recalled Heian questioning his intentions earlier and how seriously she had taken it. That look on her face had unsettled him. Still, he figured this might be for the best. With Saeyeon now part of the picture, his responsibilities had doubled. The game's monitor updated. It showed the current dating scenario: Heian positioned above the expressway, Saeyeon at the reservoir. Doyeon noted how, in most dating sims, one would choose a single romantic path. But this wasn't just a romance game. The objective was to help spirits let go of their lingering regrets and find peace. He wondered what would happen to those not chosen. Would their regrets remain unresolved? As Heian carefully finished removing the tape, she offered to handle the rest. Doyeon reflected that the game wasn't just about connections. It involved painful choices and the burden of helping lost souls. Heian asked what Saeyeon thought, and she shyly said she was okay with everything and thanked them. Heian then complimented Saeyeon's pale, baby-like skin, to which Saeyeon responded bashfully, saying Heian was pretty too. Doyeon then asked a more serious question. He wanted to understand what happened to Saeyeon. Since they couldn't stay there forever, he needed to grasp the situation to help her properly. Saeyeon apologized for the inconvenience. There was a place she wanted to visit first and asked for their help. She promised to repay them somehow. Doyeon quickly agreed, noting that their destination was her old home. Heian assumed they were going to visit her family, but Saeyeon clarified. She had lived with her grandmother, who had since passed away. That house had been her final refuge, and also the place where she died. Heian was shocked and asked what had happened. In a brief flashback, a woman stood before Saeyeon, her expression unhinged. The woman insisted she hadn't meant for things to go that far and shifted the blame to Saeyeon. She demanded the password to Saeyeon's grandmother's bank account. Back in the present, Saeyeon admitted it wasn't a pleasant story. She asked if it was okay and not to talk about it further. Then, noticing Doyeon and Heian's closeness, she asked what their relationship was. Both were flustered. Heian stumbled over her words, unsure how to respond. Doyeon simply said they ended up together somehow. A notification appeared on the screen stating that the mutual feelings between the two characters would shift based on responses. A prompt asked, "What exactly are we to each other?" Doyeon stared at it, caught off guard by the question. Meanwhile, at a convenience store, a tense exchange played out. A woman presented an ID showing the name Kang Saeyeon with her official address. The shopkeeper, however, looked skeptical, commenting that she looked different from the ID. He refused to sell to her. Frustrated, the woman insisted she was Kang Saeyeon and pointed to the mole on her face as proof, blaming weight gain for her altered appearance. She stormed off angrily, accusing the part-timer of being stubborn and unfair. She ranted about how no one believed her and accused them of calling her an impersonator. Her frustration spilled into shouting, laced with insults. The situation had become chaotic, and the threads of Doyeon's journey were now deeply entangled in something far beyond a simple game. The monitor displayed a warning. The next answer would impact the affinity levels of both characters. A prompt appeared. What are we to each other? The word subjective linked on screen. Doyeon's thoughts spiraled. The game had penalized him before for straying off script, and now it demanded a subjective answer. He reminded himself to stay calm. Whatever he said would affect both Heian and Saeyeon, and he needed to respond without hesitation. He resisted the urge to ramble and tried to speak sincerely. Heian, sensing his hesitation, encouraged him to speak freely and not worry about her. Doyeon began, these weren't just characters in a game. They had been alive and in some ways still were. He was the only one who could see them, which made him feel responsible. They were with someone as ordinary as him, and that meant something. He refused to let fear of losing affinity cloud his sincerity. From the start, he had only wanted to help them, not because of the game, but because it felt right. He admitted it was hard to define what they were exactly, but he enjoyed being with both Heian and Saeyeon. After streaming alone for years, he had forgotten what it felt like to not be alone. Even with awkward or uncomfortable moments, it now felt strange when they weren't around. Their meetings had been unexpected, but meaningful. He knew he wasn't always reliable, but he would still do his best to help. He just wanted them to find peace and be able to smile. That alone would make everything worth it. He quickly realized how cringy that sounded, but it was the truth. Heian teased him, calling him smooth, then shifted gears with a playful smirk, asking when his last relationship had been. More importantly, she brought up the name Kwon Hyo-jong. Doyeon was confused, but she explained. He'd called that name in his sleep. That had to mean something. He nervously explained she was just someone he liked a little once. Heian demanded the full story. He panicked, warning that they'd crash at this rate if she kept pressing. In the backseat, Saeyeon muttered quietly, calling him lucky. Her thoughts drifted just a little more. What if they'd met earlier? They arrived at their destination. Haeyeon acknowledged how far they'd come thanks to Doyeon's help. Sayeon felt relieved that she'd had the chance to reconnect with her family, but the culprit still hadn't been caught. Haeyeon noted that the investigation was ongoing and expressed her belief that it wouldn't be long now, especially with Doyeon involved. Doyeon watched the two interact. They were working together better than he had expected. Still, he knew Sayeon hadn't opened up about her past yet. Even when they first met, she was afraid he'd run away if he knew the truth. Her demeanor and silence said enough. She had endured something horrific. But without knowing the full story, he couldn't truly help. He gently asked if she could tell him what had happened. They were close to arriving, and he felt it would be better to understand beforehand. He admitted he might be misunderstanding, but wondered if her silence was out of fear. Sayeon quickly denied it. She just wanted to go home and promised to explain everything once they got there. Her words trembled as she began to recount what had happened. She was killed by someone she had once called a friend. One day, an old friend had contacted her, saying she had been kicked out of her home. She asked if she could stay with Sayeon for a couple of days. Sayeon couldn't refuse. Her grandmother's room was empty, so she let her stay. At first, it wasn't so bad. After losing her family, Sayeon had grown used to being alone. The presence of another person had made her feel warmth again. But that warmth quickly faded. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Her friends started acting like the house belonged to her. Tension rose. One day, after a cruel comment about Sayeon's dead family and inheritance, things escalated. Sayeon had enough and told her to leave, threatening to call the police if she didn't. As she reached for her phone, her friends smashed a liquor bottle over her head. When she came to, she was tied up in the bathroom. Her friend demanded all of her passwords for her phone, her bank account, saying she'd leave once she had the money. After taking everything, she disappeared. Sayeon was left alone, tied up and helpless. By the time she regained consciousness again, her head was floating in the reservoir. She couldn't move. She couldn't scream. She simply drifted. Later, someone walking the trail discovered her body. That was when she realized the truth. She had died. She had returned as a ghost, her body dismembered and dumped. She had tried everything, even adjusting to life as a floating head. But each time she regained awareness, she was back in the reservoir. It became a cycle of despair, isolation, and hopelessness. And then, one day, Doyeon appeared. She had felt joy, but also fear. Fear that he would run away if he knew everything. She offered to give him anything once the case was solved and promised she wouldn't bother him again. All she wanted was for him to help her, to not leave her behind. Doyeon, overwhelmed by her honesty, was struck by how much pain she carried just to speak those words. She was the one suffering the most, yet still apologized. He reminded her of his promise. He had said he would help, and he meant it. He hadn't come back for a reward. If resolving the case could make Sayeon smile again, that would be more than enough for him. She thanked him quietly. He asked if she was ready, and she nodded. In her thoughts, Sayeon accepted that she didn't belong here. She knew Doyeon was helping her simply because that's who he was. And yet, part of her still longed to stay, even just a little longer. Rain began to fall as they walked. Sayeon softly muttered that she didn't want to get wet. Even though she was already dead, just this once, since it was the last, she wished she could be a little needy. Soon, they arrived at her apartment. Haeyeon noted that no one seemed to be home. Sayeon asked Doyeon if he could enter the passcode for her. She wanted to experience what it was like to return. Doyeon saw no issue. It was Sayeon's home, and the place seemed empty. But the moment they opened the door, everything changed. A woman stood inside, eyes glaring. She demanded to know what they were doing in someone else's house. Confused and tense, Doyeon froze as the woman claimed that the apartment was hers. Doyeon, startled by the woman's sudden words, glanced at her with confusion. He wondered aloud if she was the homeowner. But the surroundings clearly pointed to Soon's house. Realizing his blunder, Doyeon quickly apologized, claiming he might have confused it with another house. He asked again, was this Kang Seon's residence? The woman confirmed it coldly. She was Kang Seon. She demanded to know who he was and why he was messing with her door lock without permission. Turning towards Seon, Doyeon asked how this had happened. He wondered if this woman could really be her. Seon stared back, thoughts storming in her mind. She questioned whether Doyeon was truly standing there, shamelessly living in this house after everything that had happened. Her memories came rushing back. She recounted how her grandmother had fallen terribly ill and eventually passed away. The only person who had ever loved her unconditionally was gone. With no one else left, her father's unresolved loan came to light. Despite everything, she couldn't bring herself to give up the house, the only place filled with her grandmother's precious memories. Determined to rise again on her own, she pressed forward. Then she found the letter her grandmother had written. It apologized to their granddaughter, blaming herself for failing to educate her son and causing their beloved child to suffer. In that letter, her grandmother revealed the truth. She had been quietly saving money through years of hard cleaning work. That money was meant to be a wedding gift, but her worsening illness had made her leave it behind just in case. She wrote that the house would legally go to her granddaughter once she passed. She proudly declared that she had done her part with the loan and expressed how smart her Seon was. Even in death, Soon's grandmother had continued to worry about her. No family, no relatives. yet still full of care. That unwavering love ignited a fire in Seon. No matter how hard life became, she clung to it fiercely. She had to live strong, because she believed her grandmother was still watching from heaven. Back in the present, Doyeon kept questioning Seon. He confirmed the woman's name, Kang Seon, and asked once more what had happened. But no one else could see her. The woman near Doyeon, confused and frightened, demanded to know who he was speaking to. There was no one there from her perspective. Panic rising, she grabbed her phone and called the police, reporting someone trying to break into the house. Doyeon tried to calm the situation, insisting it was a misunderstanding, and asked for a moment to explain. Haeun appeared beside him, her voice laced with bitterness. She admitted she had expected him to feel at least some guilt, especially after what he had done. But even then, she had been willing to forgive him, if only he had reflected on his actions and taken responsibility. With desperation in her eyes, she pleaded with Doyeon to run away with her. If he got too close, things would spiral further. Suddenly, the game issued another brutal alert. Kang Seon's mind was collapsing. A wave of emotions surged from the system window. She was in physical pain. She was drowning in despair. She was overwhelmed with sadness. She was consumed by fury. And above all, she was blaming herself. Doyeon stood frozen, thoughts swirling. None of it made sense. He wondered if this could really be the friend Seon had mentioned earlier. Before he could process further, Seon suddenly pushed the woman beside her. Doyeon shouted again and again, begging her to stop. But Seon ignored him. With a hard shove, the woman was thrown off balance and fell, crashing onto a parked car below. The impact was fatal. She died instantly. Nearby, another girl witnessed everything. Her scream broke the silence as she stood stunned, horror spreading across her face. Doyeon, overwhelmed, could only think. That was reckless. And yet, despite everything, he couldn't help but think that installing the game had been a bad decision after all. On the floor, Seon sat, murmuring to herself. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Pararap to Pia, it's not my fault." Meanwhile, from the fallen woman's phone, the voice of the police continued, asking if she was okay, if something had happened. Seon looked up and turned toward Doyeon, a disturbing smile spreading across her face. Her voice lowered as she asked if he felt the same. She told him she had tried. She really tried to forgive her. In that moment, Doyeon realized the terrifying truth. The game's heroine was a ghost, but not an ordinary one, a ghost unable to leave this world, haunted by regret and longing. Seon, still speaking softly, apologized. Her words trembled as she told Doyeon she hadn't meant to hurt him. She asked if he was surprised by everything. Doyeon, now trembling, could only panic inside. His thoughts raced. What should I do? Should I call the police first? How do I fix this? Haeun's voice cut through his panic. She urged him not to panic, to calm down, and insisted they leave immediately. But Doyeon snapped back, refusing to believe what she said. He questioned her nonsense. And then, without warning, a dark shadow emerged. It enveloped Doyeon, lifting him into the air, his body fading into the swirling blackness. Shock consumed him. As this happened, Seon slowly walked toward the spot he once stood. Her voice echoed in the air as she spoke of her wish that she had lived her life differently from the start. She called it all pointless. The game sent another alert. Seon was losing control. She continued speaking. She admitted that she liked Doyeon. He had saved her once when she had cried all alone. Doyeon remembered something she had once heard. If a ghost kills someone, they become a malevolent spirit, doomed to wander forever. Suddenly, Seon collapsed. Blood trickled from her eyes as she lay on the ground, whispering to Doyeon. Even if it was for the second time, she asked if she could still stay near him. Doyeon, horrified, turned and ran. As he did, memories of his own words echoed back to Seon. Words where he had once promised her, "Trust me, I won't run away." But now the game displayed a sharp update. Her affection dropped drastically. Her rationality completely collapsed. Her affection had become an obsession. Doyeon rushed to the door, desperate to escape, but it wouldn't open. His thoughts raced. He couldn't help it. Someone had died. Staying here any longer would only bring unjust accusations. Then behind him, Seon's form shifted once more. Her appearance changed, twisting into a terrifying ghost. Her voice turned hollow and cold as she spoke. Why is he running away? Doyeon stood there, frozen, completely overwhelmed, freaked out beyond belief. Doyeon, trembling with fear, stumbled back and collapsed to the floor. Sayeon moved quickly, her hair stretching out unnaturally to wrap around his leg, holding him in place. Her voice cracked as she reminded him that he had promised not to run. She asked if it was because she had pushed that girl, then apologized. Her anger had taken over and she admitted she couldn't control it. But she also couldn't hold it back, and deep down, she wondered if Doyeon felt the same way. Drawing closer, she placed her hand gently against his cheek, repeating the same words she couldn't hold back. Her emotions spilled over as she asked again if he felt the same. Doyeon, shaking, muttered that he understood how Sun felt. But now he was the one paying the price. If only Sayeon had explained things just a bit more. He slowly got to his feet, trying to steady himself. Sayeon glanced around and quietly said the space was small, but it was enough for both of them. She mentioned that Haeun could come too, but quickly changed her mind. Maybe it should just be the two of them. She even offered to take care of Haeun's part as well. But Doyeon's thoughts drifted elsewhere. She didn't understand him. If the police came, he would be accused of murder. The thought of running flashed through his mind, but he quickly dismissed it. He couldn't run. Not now. Even if he tried, there was no escaping it. Outside, he noticed the ambulance had arrived. The woman was being taken away to the hospital, and a crowd had already gathered. It was too late. Even if he ran, he would still be branded a killer. Regret flooded his mind. He wondered when everything had gone so wrong. Was meeting Sayeon the mistake? Was he wrong to try to help someone beyond his reach? If only he hadn't installed that game. But no, it wasn't just that. There had been so many chances to stop this. If only he had trusted Sayeon. If he hadn't panicked. If he had just believed her. His heart hardened. Pushing Sayeon's hand away with arrogance, he scoffed at the idea of living together. It didn't matter. He said he preferred bubbly girls like Haeun and called Sayeon boring, the worst kind of girl. Inside, he recalled how deeply attached Sayeon was to this house. Still, he kept his cruelty sharp. He told her he had expected to gain something from this, but didn't realize she was just a beggar living in such a filthy place. If she wanted someone to care, she should have been born to better parents. A darker thought crept in. If he could twist Sayeon's feelings and use them against her, maybe he could still control the situation. He challenged her. Was she going to push him too? It didn't matter. If he died, he could just start over. Sayeon, stunned by his cruelty, stared at him in disbelief. She called him a liar, insisting this wasn't the real him. She demanded to know why he was acting like this. Doyeon turned away coldly, walking toward the other side of the room. He muttered that it was no wonder her friend had tried to kill her. She was annoying. He told her to disappear and said he had to go find a rich and pretty ghost. The gift she had promised him was nothing but a joke. Inside, he thought back to the game. So far, that strange light only appeared when the heroine died. If that lightning strike from earlier was a safe point, Sayeon's voice cut through his thoughts. She asked why he had lied to her. She said she had trusted him. She begged him not to leave. Doyeon was overwhelmed by guilt. He could have stopped it all. If only he hadn't been so obsessed with the game. If only he had listened more carefully to Sayeon's voice. If he had sensed how angry she truly was. If he had simply trusted her and stepped in earlier. But it was too late. In a burst of emotion, Sayeon's hair lashed out again, wrapping around Doyeon's neck. She threw him down with force. Tears and rage poured from her as she screamed. Why did everyone keep betraying her? Why was it always her? As Doyeon lay on the floor, his thoughts scattered. He could have saved her before everything fell apart. He wondered if Haeun was worried about him now. A wave of sorrow passed through him. He was sorry. A cold system message appeared, flashing with finality. Doyeon has died. Doyeon suddenly found himself back at the same place once more. Everything looked untouched. Haeun was there, unharmed. Sayeon stood nearby, safe. Even Sayeon's friends seemed perfectly fine. The atmosphere was calm again, as if nothing had happened. Sayeon looked at Doyeon curiously, noticing the unease on his face. She asked if something was wrong, pointing out that he didn't look too well. A wave of relief washed over Doyeon. Without thinking, he pulled both Haeun and Sayeon into a tight hug. The unexpected gesture made the girls freeze in surprise, their cheeks flushing. Haeun, caught off guard, stammered as she asked what he was doing so suddenly. Doyeon quickly realized what he had done and stepped back, stammering out an apology. He said he had gotten emotional for a moment and only meant to say they should hang in there together. Sayeon's friend standing nearby interrupted the moment. Her tone was firm and dismissive as she questioned what he was doing in front of someone else's house and asked him to move aside. Hearing that, Sayeon became visibly upset, but Doyeon gently placed his hand on her head to calm her down. He looked at the other girl and asked if she was the friend Sayeon had mentioned earlier. He wanted to know her name. Internally, Doyeon reminded himself that right now, he was the only one they could rely on. Sayeon hesitated briefly before revealing her friend's name, Kim Yoon-kyun. Doyeon acknowledged the situation would be difficult, but he asked them to trust him. He promised he would try to fix everything. In his thoughts, he made a vow. He wouldn't run anymore. He would face everything head-on. He reminded himself not to let fear shake him. Turning back to Yoon-kyun, he apologized for causing a disturbance and said he had a lot of questions. He asked if she could spare a moment to answer them. Without drawing attention, he discreetly activated the recorder on his phone. Yoon-kyun, clearly alarmed, pulled out her phone and placed a call. Her voice trembled as she reported that a man was standing in front of her house and wouldn't let her enter. She told the police to come quickly, saying she believed he was a crazy person. Doyeon kept his composure and told her he had many things he wanted to ask. Then, without holding back, he asked where she had buried Sayeon after killing her. The question made Yoon-kyun freeze in shock, panic rising in her eyes. Still, she tried to lie her way out. She demanded to know what he was saying and accused him of being insane. She insisted she was carrying Sayeon and claimed she had just gained some weight, nothing more. But Doyeon didn't stop. He said he had seen a video once about a woman who faked her death and lived under someone else's identity. At the time, he thought such a thing couldn't be real. But now, he confronted her directly, asking if she planned to live her entire life buried inside that lie. He challenged her, asking if she thought she could get away with doing something so horrible. Yoon Kyung's defense grew more aggressive. She asked if he had come all the way there just because he saw her name on a delivery box. She demanded to know if he had done a background check and reminded him that such an act was a crime. But Doyeon pushed further. He said it wasn't a background check. He pointed out that she wasn't Kang Saeyeon. He told her that if she had even a shred of conscience left, she would admit the truth. Furious, Yoon Kyung screamed back. She insisted once again that she was Kang Saeyeon. She shouted that he had come out of nowhere talking nonsense. She asked if he even knew her, demanded to know if he knew anything about her at all. On the phone, a voice from the police line asked if the caller was okay. Yoon Kyung, still in a frenzy, cried out to the police for help. She said a crazy man was stalking her and begged them to come quickly. As tension mounted inside the apartment, Doyeon stood in stunned silence, trying to grasp what had just happened. Confused neighbors gathered outside, whispering anxiously after hearing a scream. One woman asked if anyone else heard it, wondering if they should call the police. The accused, Yoon, suddenly shouted that the man was trying to kidnap her and pleaded for someone to help. Doyeon stammered, denying the accusation and insisting that she was lying. The monitor confirmed Yoon was beginning to grow more aggressive, and Doyeon knew things were spiraling out of control. Desperate, he shouted that she had murdered someone precious to him. But the responding officers calmly informed him that Yoon's ID had already been checked, and nothing suspicious had been found in her records or the audio file. Regardless, they needed to separate both parties and requested they come to the station for questioning. Doyeon, still determined, agreed to cooperate, but begged them to verify her identity more thoroughly, at least check her fingerprints. He insisted she was a murderer. The police, trying to de-escalate, warned him not to resist and promised to look into everything properly. He continued pleading, asking anyone in the neighborhood if they knew someone named Saeyeon or at least recognized her face. An elderly woman stepped forward and declared that the woman present was not Saeyeon. She had assumed the real Saeyeon had just gone away for work, but if what the young man said was true, then something truly terrible had happened. The old woman said the girl used to live with a man and often argued. Having lived next door for years, she was confident in what she'd heard and seen. Yoon snapped, accusing the elderly woman of being senile and not even recognizing her own neighbors. The police tried to calm Yoon down, but she shouted back furiously, accusing them of painting her as a murderer. In a heated moment, Yoon's words triggered Doyeon's boiling anger, and he slapped her across the face. Saeyeon gasped, calling his name, but the damage was done. The police immediately restrained Doyeon, declaring he was now being arrested as a suspect caught in the act. Still, Doyeon didn't resist. He said if arresting him meant the case would be taken seriously, then so be it. With the witness present, all he asked was for them to check Yoon's identity again. The officers instructed both of them to come along. As Doyeon was taken in, his thoughts raced. He had actually gone through with it. He wondered if things would really be okay. Just then, Saeyeon threw herself into the police vehicle, unwilling to leave him alone. Unintentionally, they both ended up in a holding cell together. Even in that moment, Doyeon's mind returned to Haeyeon, left waiting behind. He had promised to come for her after questioning. Apologizing quietly, he blamed himself for everything. But Saeyeon took the blame onto herself, saying it was all because of what she did. Doyeon explained that they were only being held until the investigator arrives, so hopefully it wouldn't turn into anything serious. He reassured her that Yoon was also being investigated. Saeyeon, meanwhile, admitted that being with Doyeon made her feel strangely calm. She had hated Yoon so deeply, unbearably so. But when Doyeon had believed her and gotten angry on her behalf, her emotions slowly began to settle. She apologized again for dragging him into the mess, but Doyeon shook his head, admitting he hadn't been of much help. She objected passionately, saying he had already done so much and couldn't say that. Still, Doyeon brought up the promise he made to take her home. Since they hadn't made it to her house and were sitting in a holding cell instead, he technically hadn't kept that promise. But once everything was over, he swore he'd come get her that night. She softly agreed. In her heart, she quietly wished they had met just a little earlier. Then, without a word, she gently held Doyeon's hand and leaned her head on his shoulder. He called her name softly, surprised at the warmth he felt. He wondered how long it had been since he let himself lean on someone like this. Saeyeon asked him to let her be selfish just a little longer. In her mind, she apologized to Haeyeon, asking to hold on to this moment just until sunrise. But deep down, fear crept in. Fear that it might all be a dream, that he might come to hate her, that she might begin wanting something more. Doyeon promised that even if something came up and he was late, he would definitely return for her. He knew he was busy, but asked her not to start hating him or to run away again. Saeyeon smiled softly, calling him thoughtful. She promised she wouldn't run and thanked him. The monitor displayed that Doyeon had earned 90 points. One death penalty had been applied and his romance rank was now C. He stared in disbelief. It felt too real. Then he remembered the police had taken his phone earlier. Unexpectedly, the monitor updated again, confirming that her affection had increased significantly and bonus LP had been granted. But instead of satisfaction, Doyeon was left with a bitter feeling. Something about it all felt wrong. Then, a voice came through. His brother spoke from the other end, quietly and regretfully. Doyeon was shocked to hear him. His brother apologized, asking for forgiveness for trying to dump everything on him. He said he had no other choice if he wanted to survive. His voice trembled as he warned that there wasn't much time. His call would be the last. Whatever Doyeon did next, he was told not to be kind to them. As the rain continued pouring outside, Haeyeon couldn't shake her growing unease. The thought that Sayeon might be getting closer to Doyeon left her unsettled. Despite Sayeon's promise to return, worry gnawed at her. She remembered Doyeon had mentioned the Goyang police station, the same one she'd visited once before. The uncertainty pushed her to act. Even without a phone, she wasn't helpless. Declaring herself a professional walker, she resolved to head out and find him. If things didn't go well, she could always come back. On the way, a dog started barking at her. Haeyeon pleaded with the animal to move aside, reassuring it that she wasn't a bad ghost and was just trying to catch a bus. Still, the barking didn't stop. The dog's owner struggled to calm it down, confused by its behavior. Haeyeon recalled the old belief white dogs could see ghosts. For a moment, she wondered if it might be true. But before she could dwell on the thought, she noticed the bus pulling away. She shouted, begging it to wait, frustrated after having waited an hour already. Left standing in the rain, she reflected on how weak she felt without Doyeon. She felt like a person no one wanted to see, someone trudging forward without knowing why. Still, she reminded herself not to lose heart. Meanwhile, inside the holding cell, Doyeon received a call from his older brother, Sak-jae-hyun. The words that came through were grim. He warned Doyeon to never keep ghosts by his side. Confused, Doyeon asked what that even meant. The idea that this was all just a game made no sense to him. He questioned why his brother had only contacted him now. His brother apologized, saying he had no choice if he wanted to survive. There was no time to explain fully. He warned that the longer the ghosts stayed, the more they would rely on Doyeon. But he must not open his heart to them. If their affection dropped, the consequences would be dire. He urged Doyeon to listen. This was a game. Before he could say more, the call abruptly ended. An officer arrived, calling out for Choi Doyeon. The investigator had arrived. Doyeon, still shaken, tried to call his brother back from the restroom, but there was no answer. Frustrated, he questioned everything. What did "don't keep him close" even mean? Affection levels? A game? He demanded answers, but none came. Soon after, he was summoned by the lead detective. Another detective, Yeon Cheol, appeared unexpectedly, expressing interest in the case. The lead detective wasn't pleased to see him and told him to return to his own apartment, but Yeon Cheol assured him he'd stay out of the way. Doyeon, exhausted and confused, couldn't stop wondering what his brother had been trying to warn him about. What had really happened? The detective asked if he was okay, then began questioning him about the woman who had arrived with him. Upon investigation, it was confirmed that the woman was Kim Yoon-kyung, the very missing person in question, even though she continued to deny it. Doyeon nervously asked if she had mentioned Kang Sae-yeon, but the detective refused to answer that directly. He instead asked how Doyeon even knew about her, given that he didn't appear to have any prior connection. Knowing that half-truths wouldn't help, Doyeon responded honestly. It was Kang Sae-yeon herself, the deceased, who told him everything. The answer shocked the investigators. Yeon Cheol noted how exhausted Doyeon looked and suggested letting him go for the day. His identity had been verified and there was no flight risk. Given the circumstances, the case might involve public interest or even self-defense. Yeon Cheol believed Doyeon, stating clearly that he trusted him. He pointed out that if anything happened to Doyeon while in custody, it could lead to even bigger problems. The questioning was ended for the day, and Doyeon was informed to respond if summoned again. Outside the station, Doyeon thanked Yeon Cheol for helping him. He admitted how suffocating it had all been. Yeon Cheol asked what he had been up to lately. Doyeon looked like he hadn't slept at all. Doyeon apologized, saying he couldn't explain everything right now. Yeon Cheol, though curious, understood and asked for his contact information. Doyeon agreed but mentioned he needed to pick someone up. Without enough money for a taxi, he asked for a ride to Donggu Apartments. Yeon Cheol agreed but noted how obvious it was that Doyeon was pushing himself too hard. He suggested taking a break, but Doyeon shook his head. He couldn't stop now. He had made a promise. He needed to pick up Haeyeon, finish Sayeon's case, check on his brother's place again, and earn money. He had to help. They were waiting for him. Hearing that, Yeon Cheol simply nodded and told him they'd head out. But before they could leave, Doyeon collapsed. His legs gave out as he muttered to himself that he had to help. His body couldn't keep up anymore. In that moment, a memory from the past returned. A girl from his school once told him to stream his gameplay so she could see what he was doing even from home. The thought resurfaced sharply. The terrifying weight of waiting alone, he now understood it all too well.